He pointed a rifle at her chest while his son bled out in his arms. "Step back, or I'll shoot." She didn't step back. She looked past the barrel at the boy on the porch and said, "He has 9 minutes." "Who are you?" "Nobody." Her voice broke. "I'm nobody. Let me help him." Colton Hayes lowered the gun. He led a stranger into a house no woman had entered in 4 years. He didn't know she'd driven 1,100 miles to find that boy. He didn't know the birth certificate in her suitcase had his own name on it. And he'd never know what she did to get it. Before we go one step further, if you love stories about buried secrets, second chances, and the families we choose, take 1 second and hit subscribe. Stay with me all the way to the end, because what this woman is hiding in her suitcase will break your heart wide open. And down in the comments, tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. 9 hours before the rain, Colton Hayes fired a man for crying. That wasn't the reason he gave. The reason he gave was a gate. You left it unlatched. Dale Whitaker stood in the barn office with his hat crushed in both fists. "Boss, 40 head on the county road at dusk. Mrs. Pina came around that curve doing 55. She's 71 years old, Dale. 71, and she had to put a truck in a ditch to keep from killing my cattle." "I know." "Do you?" I said I know. Dale's voice broke in the middle of it, and that was his mistake. That was the whole thing right there. "My wife's sick, Colton. She's real sick. Doc Abernathy said the word nobody wants to hear, and I've been carrying it around 3 days, and I got distracted and I forgot the latch. I ain't gonna lie to you about it. I forgot." The office got very quiet. Colton looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that Dale started to hope. "Pick up your check Friday." Dale's mouth opened. Nothing came out for 3 full seconds. "Colt." "Mr. Hayes." "We've been friends 19 years. Dale took 1 step forward. 19 years. I taught your boy to ride. I carried your father's casket. I stood next to you at Sarah's funeral and held you up when your knees went, and you're telling me, pick up your check Friday." "Yes." "That's it? That's all of it?" "That's all of it." Dale stared at him, and then something in his face changed. Not anger, worse than anger. Pity. "You know what they say about you in town?" "I don't care." "They say Colton Hayes is the richest cowboy in Texas and the emptiest man in it." Dale put his hat on. "I always told them they were wrong." He walked out. Rudy Salazar had been standing in the doorway the whole time, 64 years old foreman on that land, since Colton's father ran it, and the only man alive who could still say anything he wanted. He waited until Dale's truck started up outside. "You want to tell me what that actually was?" "A gate." "That wasn't a gate." "Rudy." "He said his wife was sick." Rudy folded his arms. "And you couldn't sit in the same room with it. That's what that was. That's exactly what that was." Colton set his pen down, very carefully, like a man setting down something that might go off. "Get out of my office." "Yes, sir." Rudy turned, stopped at the door. 4 years, Colt. You keep firing every man who reminds you of her, you're gonna run out of men. And then it's just gonna be you and that boy, and about 1,000 acres of nothing to talk about." The door clicked shut. Colton sat there 11 minutes without moving. Then he picked the pen back up and wrote D. Whitaker terminated in handwriting so steady a machine could have done it. And underneath small where nobody would ever look, he wrote a number. $15,000, hospital, anonymous, no name. Because Colton Hayes was not a good man. He'd made his peace with that a long time ago. He just didn't have anywhere left to put the difference. At 6 that evening, his son asked him a question, and he didn't hear it. "Dad." "Nothing." "Dad." Colton looked up. Noah Hayes was 11 years old, small for it, with a cowlick, no amount of water would lay down, and a habit of talking to the barn cats like they were co-workers. He had his mother's mouth. That was the trouble. Colton could look at his son about 4 seconds before he had to look at something else. What? I asked if I could get a dog. No, you didn't even think about it. I thought about it 3 times last month. Answer's the same. Noah pushed a piece of chicken around his plate. Tommy Ruiz has a dog. Tommy Ruiz's daddy doesn't run 1,200 head. That's not a reason. Noah's chin came up. That's just words about cows. Marisol made a noise at the sink that was almost a laugh and turned it into a cough. Eat your dinner. I'm not hungry. Then sit there till you are. Noah sat. His fists went into his lap. And then, because he was 11, and 11 doesn't know when to stop, Mom would have said yes. The room went absolutely still. Marisol's hands stopped in the dishwater. Colton stood up. His chair scraped. He carried his plate to the sink, set it down, and walked out the back door without a single word. Noah sat there with his face burning, learning the lesson he'd been learning his whole short life. Say her name, and he leaves. Marisol dried her hands and sat down across from him. Mijo. I hate him. No, you don't. I do. You don't. She reached over and tried to fix the cowlick. It sprang right back up. You hate that he loved her so much it broke him. That's a different thing, and one day you'll know the difference. He doesn't even have pictures of her. Noah's voice was very small. Not one. I asked Rudy what she looked like, and Rudy had to describe her to me, like a stranger on the news. Marisol didn't answer that. There was no answer to that. Marisol. He wiped his face hard with his sleeve. What if I forget her I was 7? I already can't remember her voice. What if I forget the rest? And that right there was the moment that put everything else in motion. Because Marisol didn't have an answer, so she said the wrong thing, the kind thing, the thing that got a boy nearly killed. Go check the mare, she said. Bell's foaling any day now. Go on, give yourself something to do besides hurt. Noah went out the door. Marisol would think about that sentence every single day for the rest of her life. At 7:40, the storm came in off the caprock, and at 7:52, Rudy Salazar came through the front door without knocking, and Rudy Salazar had knocked on that door every day for 40 years. Where's Noah? Colton looked up from the ledger. Something in his chest dropped to floor. Barn. He's not in the barn. Then he's Colt. Rudy's face. That was the thing. Colton had known that face since he was 6 years old, and he had never once seen it look like that. Bell's stall is open. There's blood on the gatepost, and there's a boot in the aisle, and the mare's gone out the back into the pasture. Colton was already moving. Colt, how much blood? Colt, listen to me. How much blood, Rudy? Rudy said, enough. They found him 90 yards out in the mud in the dark, curled up like something dropped from a height. Colton got there first. He got there first, and he went down on his knees in 3 inches of water, and he said his son's name, and Noah didn't answer. Noah, Noah, look at me. Look at me right now. The boy's eyes opened. Barely. She was scared, Noah said. Thick, slow, wrong. Belle was scared, Dad. She was down, and I opened the gate to help her, and she... Don't talk. She didn't mean to. Don't talk. Colton got his hands under him, and that was when he felt it, the wetness that wasn't rain, warm on his palm, coming out of the boy's side, faster than rain comes out of a sky. Rudy saw his face and said, Oh, God. Truck. Colt, the county road's underwater at the low crossing. I just came through it. It's the truck, Rudy. It's 4 feet deep and running. We put a truck in that we lose all 3 of you. Colton stood up with his son in his arms, and he looked at the man who had taught him to ride, and he said the truest thing he had ever said out loud in his life. Then tell me what to do. And Rudy Salazar, 64 years old, 40 years on that land, a man who had never once been without an answer, opened his mouth and had nothing. That was 8:04. At 8:09, somebody knocked on the front door of a house where nobody ever knocked. Colton had Noah on the kitchen table and both hands pressed into his side, and he was saying, "Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me." Like the words were a rope he could throw, and the knocking wouldn't stop. "Rudy, get the door." "Colt, there's nobody out there for 11 miles. Get the door." Rudy got the door. And Colton heard a voice he had never heard before say, "Your porch light's on and your gate's open, and there's a horse standing in the middle of your road bleeding out of her hip. Somebody in this house needs help." Colton had the rifle off the wall before he knew he'd reached for it. He came around that corner with Noah's blood to his elbows and a .30-30 in his hands, and he pointed it at the woman standing in his doorway. "Step back or I'll shoot." She didn't step back. That was the first thing. That was the thing he'd remember. A stranger soaked to the skin looking down the barrel of a rifle held by a man twice her size, and she didn't move an inch. Her eyes went past him, past the gun, past everything, and landed on the boy on the table. And she went white. Not scared white. Something else. Something Colton wouldn't understand for 12 years. "Ma'am, I'm going to say it one more time. He has 11 minutes. Her voice came out strange, flat and cracked at the same time. "Maybe 9 if that's arterial." "Look at me. Look at me, sir. Is the blood pumping or is it running?" "Who are you?" "Nobody." Her throat worked. "I'm nobody. Let me help him." "You a doctor?" "I'm a veterinarian." Colton laughed. It was the ugliest sound in that house in 4 years. "He's not a horse." "No," she said. "He's a mammal with a laceration and about 9 minutes of blood left in him, and I am the only person within 11 miles who has ever put a clamp on a bleeder, and you are standing between me and your son with a rifle. So shoot me or move." Nobody breathed. Rudy said very softly, "Colt." Colton lowered the gun. She was past him before it touched the floor. She worked for 40 minutes, and she talked the whole time, and half of it wasn't to them. "Towels. Clean ones don't care about color. Sir, the tall one, I need you at his head, and I need you talking to him. I don't care what about, and if you stop talking, I will know, and I will yell at you. Ma'am, is there whiskey in this house?" "There's whiskey," Marisol said. "Bring the bottle. Not for him. For my hands. Sir Head, talk. Now." "Noah," Colton said. "Noah. Say something real that's not talking, that's saying his name. I don't know what to say to him." And she stopped. For 1 second, both hands inside a boy's side, she stopped and looked up at Colton Hayes. "Then tell him you're sorry," she said. "Everybody's got one of those." He didn't. Not out loud. He couldn't. But he leaned down, and he put his mouth next to his son's ear, and Marisol, standing 3 feet away, with a bottle of whiskey in both hands, heard him whisper something, and she never told a living soul what it was. At 8:51, the stranger sat back on her heels and said, "Okay." "Okay what?" "Okay, he's not going to die on this table." She was shaking, her whole body head to foot. "Get him to Lubbock the second that water drops. I've got him closed, but it's field work. It's ugly. He'll have a scar he can charge admission for. But he's not going to die on this table." Marisol started crying. Rudy sat down on the floor. And Colton Hayes looked at this woman he had pointed a gun at 42 minutes ago and said the only thing in his head, "What do you want?" She blinked. "What? Everybody wants something. Name it." And she laughed this small, wrecked, disbelieving laugh, and she said, "Mister, I want a towel." Her name, she said, was Evelyn Brooks. She said it at 9:30, sitting at his kitchen table, with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking from, and she said it half a beat too slow. Colton noticed. Colton noticed everything. It was the only skill he had left. "Brooks. Brooks. You got people named Brooks around here. I don't have people anywhere. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." Rudy came in from the barn hat in his hand and said, "Mare's gonna live. Whatever you did to her hip, ma'am. Compression, then a purse string. She'll be lame 6 weeks and then she'll be fine. You did that in a rainstorm in the dark." I've done worse and worse. Rudy sat down. He looked at her a long moment. Where'd you train? And there it was. Colton saw it. The tiniest hitch, a quarter second, no more. Colorado. Whereabouts? Does it matter? It might? Why? Rudy smiled at her. It didn't reach anywhere. 'Cause you knew this house. The coffee cup stopped moving. Excuse me. You came in that door and you didn't ask where the kitchen was. Rudy's voice was gentle. That was the worst part. You went straight to it. Right past the hall, right past the parlor, straight to the kitchen table like you'd eaten off it. Now I've been letting that sit for an hour, ma'am, but I'm old and I don't sleep good, and I'd hate to lie awake on it. The rain filled up the silence. Evelyn Brooks set her cup down. It's a ranch house, she said. They're all the same house. That's so. Kitchen's always at the back. Table's always under the window. You want me to tell you where your bathroom is? It's off the mudroom, and there's a second one upstairs, and it doesn't have a shower. Rudy looked at her. That's right, he said. That's every ranch house in Texas. That's right, Rudy said again, and stood up and went outside and did not come back in that night. Colton hadn't said a word. He was looking at her hands. She'd noticed him looking, and she'd put them in her lap. They were shaking. They'd been shaking since she stood up from the table. You want to know something funny? She said to nobody. I've done that surgery about 400 times. Cows, horses, one llama. 400 times, and my hands never shook once. Why are they shaking now? She looked up at him, and whatever was in her face, it wasn't anything Colton Hayes had a word for. I don't know, Evelyn Brooks said. She was lying. She knew exactly. She stayed in the guest room because the water didn't drop till 4 in the morning. At 2:15, Marisol came down for a glass of water and found the guest room door open a crack and a light on inside, and Marisol was a good woman and a decent one, and she did not stop. But she slowed. And through that crack, she saw the stranger sitting on the floor with a suitcase open in front of her, holding a photograph in both hands. And she heard Evelyn Brooks say out loud to an empty room in a voice like something coming apart, It's him. God help me. It's him. Marisol went back upstairs and lay awake till dawn and told herself she'd misheard. The water dropped at 4. They had Noah in Lubbock by 6. At 11 the next morning, a surgeon named Patel came out to the waiting room and said, Which one of you did the field repair? She did, Colton said. Patel looked at Evelyn. You a trauma surgeon. Vet. Come again. Large animal veterinarian. Patel kept looking at her. Ma'am, he said, I've been doing this 19 years. That's the cleanest tie-off I've ever seen come in off a kitchen table. That's not vet work. Vet work is fast and dirty, and it saves the animal. That was patient work. That was somebody who's been taught to care what it looks like after. A pause. Who taught you that? And Evelyn Brooks said nobody. Nobody's a hell of a teacher. He was. Patel let it go. Colton Hayes did not. Noah woke up at 4 that afternoon, and the first thing he said was, Is Belle okay? Colton had been sitting there 12 hours. That's your question. Is she? She's fine, she's lame, she's fine. Okay. Noah closed his eyes, opened them. Dad. Yeah. Am I fired too? The room did something. Colton felt the floor move under him. What? Rudy said you fired Dale for a gate. His son's voice was small and thick and perfectly clear. I opened a gate. Am I fired? And Colton Hayes, the richest cowboy in Texas, the emptiest man in it, put his face in his hands in a hospital room in Lubbock and made a sound he had not made since the morning they buried his wife. Noah watched him with wide, frightened eyes. Dad. He couldn't answer. Dad, I was kidding. He couldn't answer. And from the doorway quietly a stranger said, Noah, honey, he's not mad. Look at him. That's not mad. Noah looked. What is it? That's the other one, Evelyn said. She was going to leave. That was the plan. That was, she would tell herself later, actually the plan for about 6 hours. She got as far as the parking lot. "Ma'am." She stopped. Didn't turn around. "Evelyn." She turned around. Colton Hayes came across that asphalt like a man walking to a fence line he'd been avoiding for 4 years. "I need to say something and I'm bad at it, so I'm only doing it once." "Okay." "I pointed a gun at you." "You did? In my own door, while you were trying to help my boy." "Yes." "Why didn't you run?" And she said, and this was the answer that undid him. This was the answer he'd take out and turn over at 3 in the morning for the rest of his life. "Because you were holding him wrong." "What?" "You had your hand on the wound, but your arm was under his shoulders, and his airway was folding." Her jaw was working. "I've watched a lot of things die, Mr. Hayes. That's my whole job. That's what nobody tells you. And I have never in my life wanted to save something the way I wanted to save that boy on that table. And I don't know that boy, and I don't know why, and I have been trying to figure out why since 8 o'clock last night." She stopped. Her hand went to her mouth. She'd said too much. She knew it the second it left her. Colton didn't hear it. Not the way he should have. He just said, "Stay." "What?" "2 weeks. Belle's got 6 weeks of lame, and I've got a boy with 9 feet of stitches and a vet in this county who's 78 years old and half blind. Name your number." 2 weeks. "Mr. Hayes." "Colton." "I'm passing through." "To where?" "I don't know yet." "Then you're not passing through," he said. "You're just moving. Those are different." And she stood there in the parking lot with her suitcase in her hand, with a photograph and a folded birth certificate, and a letter from a dead man inside that suitcase. And she thought about the boy upstairs, and the mark on his shoulder, the mark she'd seen at 8:31 last night with both hands inside him. The mark she'd stopped breathing over the mark, shaped like nothing at all, like a spilled drop, like the one her mother had, like the one she had, like the one on the child she had held for exactly 4 minutes, 12 years ago, before they took him out of her arms and told her he'd died. 2 weeks, Evelyn Brooks said. She called a number from the parking lot before she went back in. It rang 4 times. "It's me," she said. "I found him." The voice on the other end was old and it was tired, and it said, "Della." "Don't call me that." "That's your name?" "It's not anymore." Her hand was shaking so hard she had to hold the phone with both. "I'm telling you, I found him. 11 years old. The shoulder. It's the shoulder, it's the exact... Della." The old man's voice changed. "Listen to me. Listen. Where are you?" "Silver Creek." Silence. Long enough that she looked at the phone to see if the call had dropped. "Get out," he said. "What?" "Get out of that town tonight." "I just found him." "Whose house?" "What? Whose house are you in?" "Hayes," she said. "It's a ranch. Colton Hayes." And the old man on the other end of that phone made a sound she had never heard him make in 12 years. Not when they'd found the first file, not when they'd found the second, not when the third one had his own signature on it. "Oh, Della," he said. "Oh, sweetheart, no." "What? What?" "Do you know who bought that baby?" The line went quiet. "They didn't buy him," she whispered. "They were told he died. She was told he was the mother was told. I know what she was told. That's what you said. You said the families didn't know. You said they were victims too. You said that's why we couldn't just... Della. You said they didn't know. And the old man said one of them did." 210 miles away, in an office with a view of nothing, a man named Wade Ferris hung up a phone and sat very still. His assistant said, "Sir, you want me to reschedule the 2 o'clock? Cancel the week." "Sir." Wade Ferris opened a drawer, took out a photograph. It was 12 years old. It showed a young woman in a hospital gown, and she was holding something, and her face was doing something no photograph should ever have to hold. He'd kept it because he was a careful man. He'd kept it because careful men keep receipts. He looked at that face for a long moment. Then he picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't dialed in 9 years. "It's Ferris," he said. She surfaced. A pause. Silver Creek. Another pause. And then Wade Ferris, 41 years old, twice elected a deacon at First Methodist, a man who had personally handed out turkeys to widows every Thanksgiving since 2009, said in the pleasant, unbothered voice of a man ordering lunch, "No, not yet. She doesn't know what she's got yet. She thinks she's found a boy." He laughed. Actually laughed. "God, she thinks it's a boy." He turned the photograph face down. "Let her get comfortable," Wade Ferris said. "Comfortable people write things down." She went back inside. She went back inside because she'd promised a man 2 weeks, and because the old man on the phone had said, "Get out," and she had never once in 12 years done what she was told, and because of what happened at the door. Noah Hayes was awake. Colton was standing by the window, with his back to the room the way he stood everywhere, and the boy looked up at her. This stranger, this nobody, this woman who had held his insides in her hands 18 hours ago, and he said, "Are you the one who fixed me?" "Yeah." "Rudy said you yelled at my dad." "I did." "Nobody yells at my dad." "Well," Evelyn said, "somebody should." And Colton Hayes at the window with his back turned smiled. It was the first one in 4 years, and there wasn't a soul in the room who saw it. "Hey," Noah said. "Lady?" "Evelyn." "Evelyn." He was fading. The drugs were pulling him under, and he was fighting it, and he lost. And right at the edge he said it, sleepy, half gone, meaning nothing by it, meaning everything. "Don't go okay?" Her hand found the doorframe. "Okay," she said. She held on to that doorframe for a long time after he was asleep, because she wasn't going anywhere. Because in her suitcase, under a photograph of a 4-minute-old baby with a spilled drop mark on his shoulder, was a folded piece of paper with a county seal on it, and a date 12 years old, and a line she had read 10,000 times. "Infant deceased." And in the corner in blue ink, faded almost to nothing, but not quite the signature of the attending physician who had signed it. W. Ferris, M.D. And under that on the line marked "Receiving Party" in handwriting, she had never been able to read one word she'd spent 12 years turning into 100 different names. She'd tried Hayes. She'd tried Haynes. She'd tried Haynes and Hearn and Havers and every county in 3 states. She had never once tried the right one. She was going to try it tonight. She tried it at 2:14 in the morning, sitting on the floor of a guest room in a house that wasn't hers with a pen in one hand and a 12-year-old piece of paper in the other, and she wrote the word Hayes in the margin next to that unreadable line. And it fit. Not close. Not almost. It fit the same lazy loop on the H, the same crossbar that ran uphill, the same crushed nothing where a Y should have been. Evelyn Brooks put her hand over her mouth and made no sound at all. She had tried 400 names in 12 years. She had driven to a courthouse in Odessa for Haynes. She had sat outside a church in Big Spring for 11 hours for Havers. She had a notebook with 398 names crossed out in it, and she had never once tried the one that was 5 feet from her asleep down the hall with 9 feet of stitches in his side. She called the old man at 2:19. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he hadn't slept either. "Gus. Della. It's Hayes." The line went quiet. "You hear me? I said it's Hayes. The receiving line. I've had it in my hand 12 years, and it says Hayes. It's always said Hayes. I know." She stopped. Everything in her stopped. "What?" "Della. What do you mean you know?" "Don't do this on a phone. You knew," she was whispering, and it was worse than screaming. "You knew, and you let me drive to Odessa. You let me sit outside a church in Big Spring in August till I passed out. You sat across from me at a Denny's in Amarillo and watched me cross out Haynes with a pen, and you knew. I knew 4 months ago. 4 months. And I have spent every day of those 4 months trying to figure out how to tell you a thing that was going to get you killed," Gus said, and his voice broke in the middle of it, and Gus Landry did not have a voice that broke. Because the second you know it, you go there. That's who you are. That's who you've been since I met you. And I couldn't, Della. I couldn't hand you the address of the only house in Texas you can't walk into. Why? Della. Why can't I walk into it, Gus? And the old man said, because of who his mother was. At 6:40 in the morning, she came down the stairs, and Colton Hayes was already at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking and a face like he hadn't been to bed. 2 weeks, he said. I said 2 weeks. I want it on paper. She almost laughed. You want a contract for 2 weeks of horsework? I want it on paper, Colton said. Because if it's on paper, you can't leave in the night, and everybody leaves in the night. That landed somewhere she wasn't ready for. Mr. Hayes. Colton. Colton. She sat down across from him. Has it occurred to you that a man who points a rifle at a stranger's chest might be part of the reason people leave in the night? He looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, he said. It occurred to me around 4. And that was the first crack, right there. Not a smile, not a kindness, just a man too tired to lie for 1 second. And she watched it happen, and she thought, oh no. Because she had prepared for a monster. She had spent 12 years building a monster in her head. The man who took him. The man who bought him. The man who signed for him like a shipment, and she had driven 1,100 miles to look that man in the face. And he was sitting there with his boy's blood still under his fingernails, admitting he was the problem. Marisol came in and saw them at the table together and dropped a spoon. Nobody mentioned it. Rudy Salazar signed nothing. You want my read? No, Colton said. I'm giving it anyway. Rudy shut the office door behind him. She's a good hand. Best I've seen with a horse in 30 years, and I've seen Dale Whitaker, and Dale Whitaker could talk a Mustang out of a barbed wire fence. A pause, and he let that name sit there like a rock on the table. And she's lying to you about something so big she can't put it down for 10 seconds. Both those things are true, Colt. I've watched her 3 days, and I still can't tell you which one matters more. You got proof. I got 40 years of looking at faces. That's not proof. It's better than proof, Rudy said. Proof lies. Faces don't. Colton didn't answer. You know what she did yesterday, Rudy said. She was up at the North Tank with Emilio, and he mentioned Dale. Just mentioned him. Said Dale used to do it this way. And she said, who's Dale? And Emilio told her. Whole thing. The gate, the cows, the wife, the check. Colton's jaw moved. And she went white, Rudy said. And then she asked one question. Which was, did anybody pay the hospital? The room got very quiet. Colton picked up a pen. Put it down. Get out of my office. Yes, sir, Rudy said. And this time he was smiling. And Colton hated him for it. Go. She found Dale Whitaker on a Thursday because she'd asked Marisol for directions, and Marisol had given them before she thought about it. He came to the door of a rent house with the look of a man who'd stopped expecting anything good through a door. Ma'am? Mr. Whitaker, my name's Evelyn Brooks. I work at the Hayes place. His face closed like a gate. Then you can turn around. $15,000, she said. He stopped. What? Somebody paid $15,000 to the hospital in Lubbock anonymous on the 7th. Your wife's account. No name attached. She held his eyes. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not even asking you to like him. I just thought you ought to know that the man who fired you drove to Lubbock the same afternoon and paid your wife's bill and didn't sign it, because if he signed it, he'd have to feel it, and he'd rather die than feel it. Dale Whitaker stood in that doorway for a long, long time. Why are you telling me? He said finally. That ain't your business. No, Evelyn said. It's not. Then why? And she said, because I've spent 12 years hating a man I made up in my head, and I'd hate for you to waste that kind of time. Dale looked at her. Who'd you make up? Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Ma'am, nobody," Evelyn said, and turned around and got in her truck and sat there for 6 minutes before she could get the key in. Noah got home on a Sunday, and by Wednesday he'd figured out the whole system. "You can't say no to me," he informed her. "I absolutely can say no to you." "You can't. You saw my insides." Noah was propped on the porch with a pillow taped to his ribs like a piece of luggage. "Once somebody's seen your insides, they're not allowed to say no to you anymore. That's a rule." "Who made that rule?" "Me, just now. It's a new rule." "Uh-huh. I want a dog." "No." He stared at her, betrayed. "You saw my insides." "I saw your spleen, kid. I didn't sign anything." And he laughed, a real one, an accident, a laugh he clearly hadn't given anybody permission to have, and then he grabbed his side and swore, and then he looked at her with pure horror to see if she'd tell. "I heard nothing," Evelyn said. "You heard nothing. I'm a veterinarian. I only speak horse." Noah Hayes decided somewhere in that 30 seconds that this woman belonged to him. He would be right about that in a way nobody in that house could have survived knowing. The dog showed up 9 days later. It was a 3-legged blue heeler out of a shelter in Post that had been slated for Thursday, and Evelyn Brooks put it in the bed of her truck without asking one single human being on God's earth. Colton came out of the barn and stopped like he'd hit glass. "No." "Okay." I said no. 4 times. 4 separate times to my son, and now once to you. That's 5. That's 5 no's in this house about this exact. He's already named it. It's been 90 seconds. He named it in 90 seconds. Evelyn agreed. It's Tripod. It's a very literal child. Colton pointed at the truck. His hand was shaking, and it wasn't about a dog, and both of them knew it. "Ma'am, you have been on this place 19 days. 20. You have been on this place 19 days, and you have moved the feed schedule. You have rehung a gate that's hung that way since my father. You have got Emilio calling you Doctora like you're a saint, and now you have brought a crippled dog into my yard without one word to me, and I want to know who the hell you think you are." And Evelyn said quietly, "I think I'm somebody who watched your son ask you for one thing for a year, and watched you say no because saying yes to him means loving him where you can feel it." The whole world stopped. Emilio, 40 feet away, put his head down and walked directly into the barn. Colton Hayes stood there. "Say that again," he said. "No." "Say it again?" "No," Evelyn said. "Once is enough. Twice is cruelty." He turned around and walked into the barn and slammed the door hard enough to knock dust off the rafters, and Evelyn stood there with her heart in her throat thinking, "I've blown it 12 years, and I've blown it in 19 days over a dog." The barn door opened. Colton Hayes came out with a length of rope and a piece of 2x4, and he did not look at her, and he did not say a word, and he walked to the porch and he started building a ramp. Because a 3-legged dog can't do stairs, he built it for 2 hours. He didn't speak once. Noah sat on the top step with the dog in his lap and watched his father work and didn't dare say anything either, and when it was done, Colton stood up and looked at the ramp and looked at his son and said, "It ain't sleeping in the house." "Okay, Dad." "It ain't." "Okay, Dad." That dog slept in that house every night for the next 11 years. She learned the shape of the family in pieces the way you learn a wound. She learned that Marisol had worked there since Colton was 14 and that she was not staff. She was the last living witness, and everybody in that house pretended they didn't know that. She learned that Rudy Salazar had a room off the tack shed that he'd lived in since 1986, and a house in town he'd never once slept in. She learned that nobody said Sarah, not once. Not in 20 days. Not the housekeeper, not the foreman, not the boy, not the hands. And the way they didn't say it was so total and so practiced that it took her 3 weeks to notice she was living inside a hole shaped like a woman. She asked Marisol about it on a Tuesday drying dishes. "There's no pictures." Marisol's hands kept moving. No, none. I've been in every room in this house except his. There's a wedding ring in a drawer in the hall, and there's not one photograph of the woman it belonged to. There were, Marisol said. Were. He took them down. When? Marisol handed her a plate. The day after. Evelyn's hands went still. The day after the funeral. The day after she died, Marisol said. Not the funeral. She died at 4 a.m. on a Sunday, and by Sunday night, that man had every photograph of his wife off every wall in this house and in a box, and he carried that box out, and he did not come back inside till Tuesday, and I have never asked him where he went, and I never will. Marisol. And the boy was 7, Marisol said, and now her voice went and she put both hands flat on the counter. The boy was 7, and he woke up Monday, and his mother was gone off the walls too, like she got taken twice. Evelyn couldn't breathe. Does Noah know that's why? Noah thinks his father didn't love her enough to keep her face. That's not— I know what it's not, Marisol said. I've known that man since he was 14 years old, but I'm the housekeeper, mija. Nobody asks the housekeeper. She picked the sponge back up. You, she said, they might ask. The letter had been written by a dead man, and Evelyn read it every 11 days like a pill. She read it that night on the floor of the guest room, and it said what it always said. Della. If you are reading this, then I have finally done the only brave thing of my life, which is die. I was there. I was in the room. I have signed 19 of those certificates, and I want you to understand what that means, because I don't think you do. It doesn't mean I looked away. It means I looked. Every time. I looked right at them, and I wrote the word deceased, and my hand didn't shake by the 4th one. 19. You were number 11. Your boy was alive when he left that building, and I held him, and he had a mark on his shoulder like a drop of something spilled, and I am telling you this because there is no forgiveness available to me, and I have stopped asking. Ferris kept a ledger. Ferris keeps everything that's his sickness. He cannot throw away a receipt. Find the ledger, and you'll find 19 mothers. Find the ledger, and you'll find what I am. I'm sorry. That's a nothing word. I'm sorry. A.R. She folded it back up. She'd been reading that letter for 6 years, and she'd never once noticed what wasn't in it. Tonight, she noticed. It didn't say, find your son. It said, find the ledger. Alan Reyes had known where her son was. Alan Reyes had held him and looked at that mark, and Alan Reyes had had 6 years and a typewriter and a bottle of pills, and he'd used his last page to tell her about paperwork. She sat on that floor and thought why, and the answer came to her at 3:40 in the morning cold, like a hand on the back of the neck. Because he knew if I found the boy first, I'd stop. He knew I'd take the boy and run, and I'd never open the ledger. He needed the other 18. He used me. She put her fist in her mouth so she wouldn't wake the house. Rudy Salazar drove to Lubbock on a Friday and told everyone he was buying a tire. He bought a tire. He was not a liar. He also sat in the county law library for 4 hours with a librarian named Peggy who owed him a favor from 1994. And at 3:15 he found what he was looking for, and at 3:16 he wished he hadn't. Evelyn Brooks, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, license issued 6 years ago. Colorado transferred to Texas 4 years ago. Clean, perfect, not one complaint, and before that, nothing. Not a bad thing. Not a record. Nothing. No address before Colorado. No school before Colorado. No car, no lease, no library card, no citation, no wedding, no nothing. Evelyn Brooks had been born fully formed at 30 years old in Fort Collins, Colorado. Rudy sat in that chair and said out loud to a room of law books, "Well, hell." Peggy looked up. "Find him?" "Find who?" "Whoever you're looking for." "No, ma'am," Rudy said. "I found nobody." He drove home with a tire in the bed of his truck and his hands at 10 and 2 and the worst feeling he'd had since 1986. Because the thing about a woman with no past isn't that she's dangerous. It's that somebody built her one, and somebody who can build a past has money. Dead. 210 miles away, Wade Ferris put down a folder and said, "That's it. That's the whole file." Bo Kessler shrugged. "That's what's out there." "Bo, I'm going to explain something to you." Ferris smiled. He had a wonderful smile. 2 elections worth. When you find nothing on a person that's not the absence of information, that's a finding. That's the loudest thing a file can say. It says somebody scrubbed her. He tapped the folder. Now who's got the money to scrub a woman and the reason to point her at Silver Creek? Could be nobody. Could be she's just, Alan Reyes killed himself 6 years ago, Ferris said pleasantly. You know what 6 years ago is, Bo? When she got her license. When she got her life. Ferris leaned back. He gave her one. That soft, weeping, useless man gave her one on his way out the door, and then he put a gun in his mouth so he wouldn't have to watch what she did with it. He looked at the window. How long she been out there? 26 days. Anybody in that house talked to her. All of them. The old Mexican, the foreman. Salazar's got questions. Salazar's always got questions. He's had questions since 1986. That's why he's still a foreman at 64. Ferris waved a hand. Who else? Bo hesitated. The kid. Wade Ferris stopped moving. It was small, but it was total. Say that again? The boy. Noah. He's, kids on her like a burr. Won't get off the porch without her. And Wade Ferris Deacon, benefactor, turkey giver, sat there for 11 seconds with his hands perfectly still. And then he said something Bo Kessler would repeat under oath 4 years later. That's my sister's boy, he said. That is my sister's boy. Sir. Get out. Sir, what do you want me to... Get out. Bo got out. And Wade Ferris turned that photograph face up on his desk for the first time in 12 years and looked at a young woman in a hospital gown and said out loud to no one in the quietest voice he owned, Sarah, baby, what did I do? They started riding in the evenings, and it was Noah's fault technically. He asked her to come. She said yes. Colton said he'd come to make sure nobody killed themselves. Then Noah couldn't ride because of his ribs. Then Noah didn't come at all. And nobody canceled it. That was how it happened. That's how it always happens. Can I ask you something? Colton said 3 weeks in. You can ask. That's not a yes. Nope. He almost smiled. Where'd you learn to talk like that? Like what? Like a fence. Evelyn laughed out loud, surprised before she could stop it, and Colton Hayes turned his head and looked at her like she'd done something dangerous. Don't do that, he said. Do what? That. Laugh. Yeah. Why not? And Colton said, because I've been in a real quiet house a real long time, ma'am, and I'm about half afraid of the noise. She didn't have anything for that. She rode 100 yards without saying a word, and her chest hurt the whole way. Colton? Yeah. I need you to know something, and I need you to not ask me why. He waited. Whatever happens, Evelyn said. Whatever you find out about me, whatever anybody tells you, that boy is safe with me. That's the one true thing I've got, and if you never believe another word out of my mouth, believe that one. The horses walked. That's a hell of a sentence, Colton said finally. Yeah. You want to tell me what's on the other end of it? No. Okay. She looked at him. Okay. That's it. A woman tells you that, and you say, okay. And Colton Hayes said, Ma'am, 4 years ago, I asked a lot of questions I didn't want the answers to. It didn't bring anybody back. I've retired from it. He rode ahead. Evelyn Brooks sat on that horse and watched him go, and thought with absolute clarity, I am going to destroy this man, and he's going to let me. The first time she pulled away, it was over a jar of peaches. Marisol had them in the pantry, 40 jars, dust an inch thick, And Evelyn was reorganizing because she reorganized when she couldn't sleep, and she took one down and read the label. S.H. August. She put it back, took down another. S.H. August. 40 jars, every one of them. Marisol, don't. Marisol, who canned these? Put it down, mija. These are 12 years old. 11, Marisol said. Put it down. And Evelyn turned around with a jar of dead peaches in her hand and said, "Why is nobody in this house allowed to say her name?" Silence. "Because," said Colton from the doorway, "I asked them not to." Evelyn didn't move. "How long were you standing there?" "Long enough." "Colton, you want to know why?" He came in. He wasn't angry. That was what scared her. "You want the real one? Not the sad one? The real one?" "Yes." "Because I don't remember her voice," Colton Hayes said. "It's been 4 years, and I can see her hands, and I can see the back of her neck, and I cannot get her voice, and every time somebody says Sarah out loud, my brain puts their voice on her. Marisol's, Rudy's, my son's. It patches her together out of whoever said it last." His jaw worked. "So I asked them to stop, because if nobody says it, then the last voice on it is mine. And that's all I got left of my wife, ma'am. The last voice on her name." Evelyn put the jar down. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry I didn't. You couldn't have known." "That's not—" She was backing up. She was actually backing up out of the pantry, and Marisol saw it, and Colton saw it. "I have to go check the mare." "Evelyn? I have to check the mare." She got outside and made it about 40 feet, and then she went down on her knees in the dirt with both arms around herself because she had just found out what she was actually here to do. She wasn't here to take a boy from a monster. She was here to take a boy from that. She almost left on the 31st day. She had the truck loaded at 4 a.m. She had the suitcase in the passenger seat. She had her hand on the key. And she looked up, and there was an 11-year-old boy standing in the headlights in his pajamas with a 3-legged dog. She got out. She left the door open. That's how fast. "Noah, you're leaving. Honey, you're leaving." He wasn't crying. That was the thing she'd never get out of her head. He was standing there absolutely calm, like a man reading a weather report. "It's okay, everybody does. I just wanted to see it. I never got to see it before." "Noah, listen to me. My mom left in the night." He shrugged. "Marisol says she didn't. She says the ambulance came, but I woke up and she was gone, so that's leaving in the night. That's what it is, right? You're there, and then it's morning, and you're not." Evelyn Brooks put her suitcase back in the house. She did it right in front of him. She walked past him and up the ramp and into the house, and she set that suitcase down in the hall, and she came back out. "Look at me." He looked. "I'm not going anywhere." "Everybody says, 'I'm not going anywhere,'" she said, "and I need you to understand that I am not saying it to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's a fact, like gravity, like the sun. You are stuck with me. You can be a horrible little monster to me for the next 10 years, and I will still be standing right here being extremely annoying about it." Noah's face did something terrible. It cracked. All at once, all over the way ice does. "That's not fair," he said. "You can't just say that." "I just did." "You can't." And he hit her, twice with the flat of his hands on her chest, small, stupid, furious. And then he grabbed 2 fistfuls of her shirt and put his forehead into her ribs and made a sound she would hear in her sleep for the rest of her life. She held on to him in the headlights of her own idling truck at 4:15 in the morning. She had held him one other time. It had lasted 4 minutes. Colton Hayes watched the whole thing from the porch and never said a word, and went back to bed and lay there staring at the ceiling until the sun came up and thought about the fact that he had not moved. He hadn't moved because for 1 second, 1 whole second, he'd been afraid that if he walked out there, she'd stop. That was the first time in 4 years Colton Hayes wanted something. It scared him so bad he skipped breakfast. Gus called on the 34th day and said one sentence. Sarah Hayes was Wade Ferris's sister. Evelyn stood in a pasture with a phone against her ear and did not fall down. Say it again. His baby sister, younger by 9 years. He raised her after their mother passed. Gus's voice was flat, which meant he'd been practicing. She married Colton Hayes in 2007. She had a baby in 2011, and she buried it. Della, listen to me, listen, she buried it. There's a stone. It's real. Sarah Hayes had a stillbirth at 36 weeks in July of 2011, and there's a headstone in Silver Creek with a name on it. What name? Noah. The phone slipped and she caught it. Gus. Della. Gus. 6 weeks later. Gus said, Sarah Hayes came home from a trip to her brother's with a baby. No. Della. No, he'd know, the man would know, you don't just. He was in a hospital in Amarillo, Gus said. Rolled a truck. Broke his back in 2 places. He was flat on a board for 9 weeks, and his wife came to see him with a baby in her arms and told him it was his, and he cried Della. That's the thing I need you to hear before you do whatever you're about to do. He cried. There's 4 nurses who remember it. That man laid there in a body cast and cried like a child because he'd been told his son was dead, and then his son wasn't. Evelyn Brooks stood in a pasture. Then who, she said, put the name on the stone? That's the wrong question. Then what's the right one? Gus said. Who took it off the certificate? She went to the cemetery that night with a flashlight. She found it in 11 minutes because it was the only small one. Noah Hayes, July 2011. Our boy. And she stood there and did the thing she had promised herself she would never do, which was the math. July. Her boy was born in July. She had been 19 years old, and she had walked 11 miles to a clinic because she couldn't go home. And she had a boy at 4:40 in the morning on a Tuesday in July, and a man had held him up, and she had seen the mark on his shoulder like a drop of something spilled. And then a woman had said, "Let me just get him weighed, honey." And that was it. That was the whole thing. Let me just get him weighed, honey. 4 minutes. Evelyn knelt down in front of that headstone and put her hand flat on it and said out loud to a rock, "Where's your baby, Sarah?" And that was the question. That was the actual question, and she heard it come out of her own mouth, and she understood all at once, standing in a graveyard at 11 at night, that she was not the only mother in this story who'd lost a child. She was just the only one who'd been told the truth about it. She got back at 12:40, and every light in the house was on. Colton was standing in the drive. "Where were you?" "Out." "Evelyn." "I said out." "There's a man been calling this house." Colton's voice was strange. "4 times tonight. Won't leave a name." Marisol picked up the last one, and he asked for Della. The world tipped. "He got the wrong number," Evelyn said. That's what she told him. Good. And he said, Colton went on watching her face, "Tell her Gus says get out of the house." Nobody moved. "Now I don't know a Gus," Colton said, "and I don't know a Della. But I know my housekeeper, and Marisol's hands were shaking when she hung up that phone, and Marisol carried my mother's casket, ma'am. Marisol doesn't shake." Evelyn stood there. "Ask me," she said. "What?" "Ask me, right now. Ask me who Della is, and I'll tell you." She was crying, and she didn't know when that started. "Ask me, and I'll tell you every word of it, Colton. I swear to God I'll stand right here and tell you the whole thing, and then you can put me off this place, and I'll go, and I won't fight you, and I won't come back. Just ask me." Colton Hayes looked at her for 11 seconds. Then he said, "No. No. No. Colton, I've been doing this a long time," he said. 4 years. I've gotten real good at it. You want to know how I do it, I don't ask. Because there's a version of the next 10 minutes where you tell me something and then you're gone, and there's a version where I don't ask, and you're still standing in my driveway in the morning. His voice cracked once right at the end. "And I've buried one of these already, so no ma'am. I'm not asking. And I'd take it as a kindness if you didn't offer again." He turned around and walked into the house. And Evelyn Brooks stood in that driveway with the truth in her mouth like a stone she'd carried 1,100 miles and nowhere on God's earth to put it down. Rudy caught her at the barn at 6 the next morning, and he had a folder. Sit. Rudy. Sit. She sat. He put the folder on the tack bench. Evelyn Brooks got a license 6 years ago in Fort Collins. Before that, there's nothing. Not a parking ticket, not a phone bill. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Now I've had that 4 days, and I've had 4 days to figure out what to do with it. And here's where I landed. So you listen good. Okay. There's two kinds of people with no past, Rudy said. There's the kind that burned theirs, and there's the kind that somebody burned for them. And the difference between those two, ma'am, is who was holding the match. Evelyn didn't say anything. I watched you with that boy, Rudy said. I've watched you 35 days. And a woman who's running a play on a rich man does not get up at 3 in the morning to sit outside a kid's door because he had a bad dream and she thought nobody saw her. You saw me. I see everything. It's my whole job. Rudy pushed the folder across the bench. So here. She looked at it. What is this? It's yours. Rudy. It's the only copy, he said. Peggy owes me. Nobody else is gonna pull it. Burn it, keep it, eat it. I don't care. He stood up. But I'm gonna tell you what I told him in 1986 when he was 14 years old and his daddy just died and he wanted to sell this place. What? Whatever it is, Rudy Salazar said, tell him before somebody else does. That's the whole thing. That's the only difference between a hard year and a dead family. Whoever says it first. He walked out. Evelyn sat there with a folder in her lap, containing the entire fictional life of a woman who did not exist. And she thought about how many days she had left. That's the entire world in one night, and this county doesn't hand out medals, but it ought to. Wade, Colton said. What's in the folder? Ferris looked down at his own hand, like he'd forgotten it was there. What's in it? Nothing you want at a rodeo. Wade, son, I'm asking you to let me buy you a cup of coffee tomorrow. What's in the folder? And Wade Ferris let out a breath and did the thing he had driven 210 miles to do, which was look sorry about it. There's no Evelyn Brooks, he said. The people nearest them stopped talking, not all at once. In a ring spreading out the way water goes. There's a license, Ferris said. 6 years old, Colorado. And behind that license there is nothing, Colton. Not a school, not a landlord, not a birth certificate, not a soul on God's earth who can tell you where that woman was on any day of her life before 6 years ago, and I have had 3 men on it for a month. He held the folder out. I'm not enjoying this. I want you to know that. Colton didn't take it. Take it. No. Colton. I said no. There's a woman living in my sister's house, Ferris said, and his voice changed, dropped, went flat, went true. Sleeping 30 feet from her boy, and nobody in Texas knows her name. Now you can hate me tomorrow. I've been hated by better. But you are going to take this folder. I know she's lying. The whole ring went silent. Ferris blinked. Come again. I know she's lying, Colton Hayes said. I've known 39 days. My foreman told me. My housekeeper told me. She told me herself. Wade, she stood in my driveway at midnight and offered me the whole thing, and I said no. He was shaking. Everyone could see it. So you drove all this way to hand me a folder about a thing I already knew, and you did it in front of 400 people, and I'd like you to tell me why. Ferris stared at him, and for 1 second, and Gus Landry saw it and never forgot it. Wade Ferris was not in control of his own face. Because you're not thinking straight. That's the first true thing you've said. Colton, I'm not thinking straight, Colton said. I haven't thought straight since a woman put her hands inside my son on my kitchen table. I'm aware. Everybody's aware. Rudy's been telling me for a month, and Marisol looks at me like I'm on fire. He stepped in. But you didn't come here for me. You came here for her. You've been in this town 28 hours, and you bought lunch for 11 people, and you cornered my foreman in a parking lot, and now you're standing in a shoot alley with a folder. And Wade, I've known you 19 years, and you have never once done a hard thing where people could watch." Ferris's jaw moved. "That's not fair." "It's not," Colton agreed. "Neither's this." And Evelyn Brooks, who had not said one word, who had not turned around, who had stood there through every second of it, with her eyes shut, opened her eyes and said, "He's right." Colton turned. "What?" "He's right," she said again. "There's no Evelyn Brooks." "Ma'am, everything in that folder is true, Colton, all of it. There's no school, there's no landlord, there's no birth certificate." Her voice was perfectly steady, which was the worst part, which was the part Marisol would describe at 3 a.m. for years. "A dead man bought me that name 6 years ago because he couldn't stand what he'd done and he thought a driver's license was an apology. And I took it. I took it, and I used it, and I have been using it for 6 years, and I would use it again tomorrow." Nobody breathed. "Say your name," Ferris said. "No." "Say your name." "Make me." And Wade Ferris smiled, and it was the last real smile he ever gave anybody in that town. "Della Reyes," he said. Gus Landry made a sound. "Della Reyes," Ferris said louder, turning, giving it to the ring, giving it to the whole county. "Daughter of Alan Reyes, physician deceased of Amarillo, Texas, who put a gun in his mouth 6 years ago in a garage after 31 years of practice, and left this girl a name and a house and a bank account. And I am so sorry, Colton. I am so sorry to be the one." "That's not my father." Ferris stopped. "Excuse me, Alan Reyes was not my father." Evelyn's hands had opened at her sides. "He was the man who signed my son's death certificate." The world went out from under 400 people at once. "He was the man," she said, "who stood in a room in July of 2011 and looked at a living child and wrote the word deceased on a piece of county paper, and then he did it 18 more times, and then he spent 6 years drinking and building a woman named Evelyn Brooks out of nothing, because he couldn't give me back what he took." Her voice cracked once, and she took it back. "He didn't leave me a name because he was my father, Mr. Ferris. He left me a name because he was a coward, and a coward's apology costs about $4,000 and a trip to Colorado." Ferris did not move. "That's a hell of an accusation." "It's not an accusation," Evelyn said. "He wrote it down. He wrote it all down and mailed it to a claims investigator in Odessa and then went out to his garage." She looked past him. "Hi, Gus." Gus Landry, 73, was crying openly now. "Hi, sweetheart." "Show him." "Della." "Show him." And Gus Landry reached into his jacket with both hands shaking and brought out a letter that had been folded so many times it had gone soft as cloth, and Wade Ferris looked at it, and every drop of blood in the man's face went somewhere else. "That's not real." "You know it's real." "That's a suicide note, is not?" Colton listened to me, a suicide note from a drunk 6 years old. "It has your name in it," Evelyn said. Silence. 19 times, she said. That said, Colton Hayes said, "What did you say about July of 2011? Nobody answered him. He said it louder. "What did you say about July of 2011? And Evelyn Brooks turned around and looked at the man who had told her 40 seconds ago that he couldn't resist her anymore, and she understood completely all at once, standing in the dirt, that she was about to take everything he had. "Colton, my son was born in July of 2011. "Colton, please. My son was born in July of 2011, and I was in a hospital in Amarillo with my back broke in 2 places, and my wife walked in that door with a baby, and—" He stopped. Something happened to his face. "And I never saw the birth certificate," he said. Ferris said, "Colton, I never saw it." He was talking to nobody now. "I was on a board for 9 weeks. She handled it. She handled all of it. She had to. I couldn't sit up to sign my own name. Colton, Wade, shut your mouth." He turned on him, and 400 people flinched. "Whose signature is on my son's paperwork?" "Son. Whose?" "Mine," Wade Ferris said. And there it was. Right there in the dirt in front of the announcer's stand at the Silver Creek Rodeo, in front of the sheriff and the Methodist minister and 11 people he'd bought lunch for. I was his uncle, Ferris said. I was a doctor. My sister was 29 years old, and she'd just buried a baby, and her husband was in a body cast 4 hours away. And I signed for her because somebody had to. And if that makes me a criminal in this county, then... You buried a baby. Ferris stopped. What? You said she'd just buried a baby, Colton Hayes said. The silence that came down then was different than the others. It had weight. Sarah lost a baby in July of 2011. Colton said, and then Sarah came home with a baby in September of 2011, and I have never in my life, not one time, not once in 11 years, put those two things in the same sentence. Colton. There's a stone, Colton said. There's a stone out there with my son's name on it. Colton, don't. Whose baby is in that ground, Wade? And Wade Ferris said nobody's. Marisol Ibarra started screaming. That was the thing nobody expected. Not the crowd, not the sheriff, not Colton, a 61-year-old woman who had not raised her voice in that county in 40 years, came out of the crowd screaming in 2 languages, and Rudy Salazar caught her around the waist and held on. You knew, she was clawing at him. You knew, you were in my kitchen. You were in my kitchen with that box, and I asked you what was in it, and you said linens. Marisol, I asked you what was in the box. Rudy said, Mari, stop. He carried a box out of that house in July. Marisol sobbed, and I asked him, and he said linens, and there was a stone in the ground 2 days later, and I stood at it, and I prayed at it. Rudolfo, I prayed at an empty... She couldn't finish. The sheriff, a 40-year-old man named Curtis Pope, who had voted for Wade Ferris twice, said very carefully, Wade, I think you ought to stop talking. There's nothing to stop. Ferris hadn't moved. He was the only person in that entire alley who hadn't moved. There's no crime. There's no body. There's no baby. My sister had a stillbirth at 36 weeks, and she couldn't look at it. And I handled it, and I put a stone up because she needed a stone. And if you want to dig up an empty grave in front of God, and everybody, Curtis, you go get a shovel. Wade, but you tell me what statute that is. He turned in a slow circle. He was smiling again. He'd gotten it back. Tell me the crime. A grieving woman, an empty box, a stone. You want to arrest me for a stone? He looked at Colton. I loved my sister. That's all this is. That's all it's ever been. I loved my sister, and she was dying in front of me, and I did what a brother does. And Evelyn Brooks said, how did you know she'd need one? Ferris turned his head. What? Oh, Sianda, you filed 4 days early, Evelyn said. Everything stopped. Number 11, she said. There's a request form. It's dated 4 days before I delivered. It's got a physician's signature on it, and it's got a due date, and it's got a description of me, my age, my height, my hair, Mr. Ferris. And it was filed 4 days before my son was born. Ferris's face did nothing. Which was the tell? Which was the whole thing? Because a man who is confused does something. Somebody ordered a baby 4 days early, Evelyn said. Somebody knew what I looked like, and when I was due, and that I had nobody, and that I'd walk 11 miles rather than go home. And there's a line on that form for the receiving family, and it's blank. Ma'am, it's been blank for 12 years. You're not well. Hayes got written in later. Different ink, different hand. Her voice was rising, and she let it. So here's my question, and I've had it about 96 hours, and I have not slept once. You didn't know who you were giving my baby to. You ordered him, and you didn't have a family for him yet. She stepped in. Who was he for Wade? Nobody breathed. Who ordered a baby in July of 2011 and didn't have a name to put on him. And Wade Ferris said, and this was the thing. This was the sentence. This was the one that 400 people carried home and told their husbands and their wives and their grandchildren. He wasn't for anybody. He was for inventory. Curtis Pope put his hand on his radio and didn't key it. Nobody moved. Not one person in that alley. "Say that again," Colton said. Ferris closed his eyes. He'd heard it. That was the thing. He'd heard it come out of his own mouth. 22 years in government, and 2 elections, and 1,000 careful sentences, and he'd said inventory in front of the Methodist minister. "Wade, you don't understand how it worked." "Say it again." "You don't understand." And now his voice went all at once, and it was ugly, and it was human, and it was the first honest sound Wade Ferris had made in public since 1998. "You think there was a list? You think there was a catalog and people ordered off it? There were girls, Colton. There were girls coming through that clinic with nothing, and there were people with money and empty rooms, and the 2 things did not line up on a calendar. They never lined up. That's not how a due date works. You take the child when the child comes, you hold the child, and then when a family comes along, you—" He stopped. "Finish it," Colton said. "No." "Finish it?" "There were 9 weeks, Wade Ferris said. Evelyn Brooks made a sound. 9 weeks, he said, between July and September. 9 weeks where my sister was in a bed in the dark and would not eat, and would not speak, and would not look at me. 9 weeks where I sat there and watched the only person I ever loved on this earth stop being alive while she was still breathing. His eyes were streaming, and his voice was absolutely level. And I had a boy in a house in Amarillo with a woman who got paid to keep him till a family came. Wade? I had a boy, Ferris said, and I had a sister, and they were 40 minutes apart, and I did the math on a Tuesday. Colton Hayes hit him. It was not a fight. Nobody would ever call it a fight. He crossed 6 feet and put his fist in Wade Ferris's mouth, and Ferris went down. That was the part. That was the part that would take Colton Hayes 11 years to put down. Not that his son had been bought. That his wife had come into that hospital room with a baby in her arms and cried and put the child on his chest and said, "Look at him. Look at him. He's here." And his wife had believed it. Sarah Hayes had believed it, which meant either she was the best liar who ever lived, or her brother had lied to her too. And Colton Hayes, on his knees in the dirt with 3 men holding his arms, looked up at Wade Ferris's bleeding mouth and asked the only question left in the world. "Did she know?" Ferris spat blood. Wade. Nothing. "Did my wife know?" And Wade Ferris, deacon benefactor, turkey giver brother, looked at him for a long, long moment. "No," he said. Colton went limp. "She thought he was an adoption," Ferris said. "She thought there was a girl in Lubbock who couldn't keep him. She asked me, Colton, she asked me for 2 years. She wanted to write that girl a letter. She wanted to send her pictures every Christmas." His voice failed. "I wrote them." "What?" "I wrote the letters back." He was crying now openly in front of the whole county. "Every year, 11 years, in a woman's handwriting. Thank you for the pictures. He looks happy. Please don't look for me." He put his hands over his face. "My sister kept them in a box." Marisol said from somewhere in the crowd, in a voice with nothing in it, "The linens." Bund. Nobody had seen Noah Hayes get there. That was the thing that came out later in the depositions in the newspaper in a courtroom in Lubbock. Nobody could say when he'd arrived. Emilio swore he'd had him by the hand at the funnel cake stand. 4 different people put him in 4 different places. He'd been there 11 minutes. He was standing at the rail with a photograph in his hand. "Noah," Colton said. The boy didn't look at him. He was looking at Evelyn. "Noah, get in the truck. Is this you?" Evelyn Brooks stopped breathing. He held it up. A young woman in a hospital gown, 19 years old, holding something wrapped in a blanket, her face doing the thing no photograph should have to hold. "Honey, it's got a date on the back." His voice was so calm. That was the unbearable part. It was so calm. "It says July 11th, 2011. That's my birthday." Noah put that down. "It's my birthday," he said, "and there's a lady holding a baby, and she's got a mark on her arm like a spilled drop, and I've got one on my shoulder, and Marisol says it's a birthmark, and only families get the same one." The whole world was silent. "So I'm asking, Noah Hayes said, and his chin came up, and it was Sarah's chin, and it was Della's chin, and it was the same chin, it had always been the same chin, and every single person in that alley saw it at the exact same moment. I'm asking in front of everybody so you can't lie, because that's what Dad does. He asks in front of everybody. Noah, are you my mom? Evelyn Brooks went down. Not dramatically. Her knees just stopped. Rudy caught her elbow, and she didn't seem to notice. Answer him, Ferris said from the ground through blood. Wade, so help me God. Answer him, Ferris said. You've had 96 hours, Della. You've had 40 days in his house. You want to be his mother, be his mother. Mother's answer. And Evelyn Brooks looked at her son. Her son. 11 years old, small for it cowlick that wouldn't lay down 9 feet of stitches in his side, standing at a rail at a rodeo, holding the worst photograph ever taken. Yes, she said. Noah nodded. That was all. He nodded like a man being told his truck was ready. Okay, he said. Noah. Okay. He was still nodding. Okay. Honey, listen to me. How long have you known? She couldn't answer. How long have you known? Since the first night, Evelyn said. The sound Colton Hayes made was not a word. Since the first night, she said. Since 8:31, the night of the rain. I had both hands inside you, and I saw the mark, and I knew, and I finished the surgery, and I have known for 40 days. Noah stared at her. You knew for 40 days. Yes. You knew for 40 days, he said, and you let me ask you for a dog. And there it was. That was the one. Out of everything said in that alley, out of inventory, and out of 11 years of forged letters, and out of an empty grave that was the sentence that put 400 grown people in their hands. Noah. You knew for 40 days, and you sat on my porch, and you said no about a dog, and you made jokes. His voice broke into pieces. You were being funny. You were being funny at me. You knew, and you were being funny. Baby. Don't call me that. He was screaming now, 11 years old and screaming at a rodeo. You don't get to just you knew every single day. You knew when I hit you in the headlights, and you let me. And you knew. Noah, please. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was scared. Of what? And Evelyn Brooks said, that you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now. Buell. Noah turned to his father. Did you know Colton Hayes on his knees in the dirt? No. Did you know she was my no son? Did you know I wasn't Noah? Say it. The boy was shaking so hard he had to hold the rail. Everybody's saying everything. Everybody's saying it in front of the whole town, so say it. You are my son, Colton said. That's not what I asked. You are my son, Colton Hayes said, and I have been holding you since you were 9 weeks old, and I had a broke back, and they had to lay you on my chest, because I couldn't lift my arms, and I don't care what's on a piece of paper in Amarillo, and I don't care what's in that folder, and I don't care what's in that ground. But you didn't know. Silence. Dad, did you know? No, Colton said. I didn't know. Noah nodded again. So Mom lied to you? Noah. Mom lied to you for 11 years, Noah said, and she lied to me for 40 days, and you took all the pictures off the wall, so I don't even know what the liar looked like. Nobody could speak. That's everybody, Noah Hayes said. That's every single person. That's the whole list. And he dropped the photograph in the dirt and walked away, and the last thing he said to nobody, and it was the quietest sentence at that rodeo, and the loudest thing anybody there ever heard. I want to go home, and I don't know where that is. Emilio went after him. Rudy went after Emilio. It took 11 minutes to find him in a stock trailer sitting on the floor with his arms around a 3-legged dog that had somehow gotten there, and nobody ever figured out how the dog got there. Not ever. Back in the alley, Curtis Pope was reading Wade Ferris his rights and doing a bad job of it because his hands were shaking. The right to an attorney. Curtis. If you cannot afford one, Curtis. Ferris was almost gentle about it. Son, I am an attorney. You're a doctor. I'm both, Wade Ferris said. That's the whole problem, isn't it? And he let himself be walked to the car, and he stopped at the door, and he turned around and found Evelyn Brooks in the crowd, and he said one thing. Della. She looked up. There's 18 more, Wade Ferris said. I know. You don't. His mouth was bleeding, and his eyes were clear as water. You think you're going to open a ledger and find 18 sad girls and 18 happy endings. You're not. He smiled. It had blood in it. You're going to find 18 houses. You're going to find 18 men who love their kids. You're going to find a boy in Midland who's 14 and got a scholarship and a girl in Abilene who's 9 and doesn't know, and you're going to have to walk up 18 driveways and knock. Wade? And every single one of them, he said, is going to look at you exactly the way that boy just did. Curtis Pope put his hand on his head and put him in the car. Colton found her at 11 that night sitting on the ramp. He sat down beside her. He didn't touch her. They were quiet for a long time. Della, he said. Yeah, that's a hell of a name. It's not a very good one. It's better than Evelyn, Colton said. Evelyn always sounded like a lie. I couldn't have told you why for 40 days. She almost laughed. It came out wrong. He's not talking, she said. No. Is he? He's asleep. Dog's on the bed. Colton put his elbows on his knees. Marisol's sitting in the hall with a chair. She says she's not moving till Tuesday, and I believe her. Colton? Don't. I have to say it. You don't have to say anything tonight, Colton Hayes said. There's about 400 things that need saying, and every one of them can wait till the sun's up, and I want to tell you why, and then I'm going to bed. He looked at his hands. Because I said something to you today, before all of it, and I've been sitting in there for 3 hours trying to figure out if I'd take it back. She didn't breathe. And Colton Hayes said, I wouldn't. Her whole face came apart. Don't, she said. Don't be kind to me. Don't you dare not tonight. I can take anything but that. I'm not being kind. Colton, I'm being accurate, he said. There's a difference, and it's the only thing I've got left. I said I couldn't resist you, and then I found out you knew for 40 days, and I've been sitting in that kitchen going through every one of them looking for the lie. You'll find it. I did find it. He turned and looked at her. You lied about who you were. That's it. That's the whole list. 40 days and 1 lie. That's not... You didn't lie about him, Colton said. You built a ramp. You drove to Dale Whitaker's house. You sat outside my boy's door at 3 in the morning because he had a bad dream. You got up every day, and you were funny at him. His voice went. And I've been thinking about that. That's the thing he can't forgive, and it's the thing that's going to save him, and it's going to take him about 20 years to know the difference. You knew who he was, and you were funny at him. You didn't grab him. You didn't run. You had him in your arms in my headlights at 4 in the morning, and you put your suitcase back in the house. Colton, stop. 40 days, he said, and you never once took him. And ma'am, I'd have never known. Della Reyes put her face in her hands and made a sound that Marisol heard from the upstairs hall and never once told anybody about. Gay. They sat there a long time. He's going to hate me, she said finally. Yeah. You're supposed to say no. I'm not going to lie to you tonight, Colton said. That's the only thing I've got to give you, and I'm giving it. He's going to hate you. He's going to hate you for about 2 years, and then he's going to hate you on and off for about 10, and then one day he's going to be 30, and he's going to call you at 11 at night about something stupid, and that'll be the end of it. He rubbed his face. And he's going to hate me too. And Marisol. And Rudy. And a woman in the ground he can't even remember the voice of. Colton. Yeah. There's 18 more. He was quiet. I heard him, he said. I have to go knock on 18 doors. I know. I have to walk up to 18 houses, Della said, and take 18 kids' whole lives apart. And I have to do it knowing what it does, because I just did it to one. I did it to one today in front of the whole county. Yes. And you're supposed to tell me not to. Colton Hayes said, "I'm not going to tell you not to." She looked at him. "There's 18 women," he said, "who got told their baby died, and every one of 'em's been standing in a pasture at 3 in the morning for 12 years. Colton. And there's 18 men like me," he said, "who don't know, who are sitting in a kitchen right now loving a kid, and it's real, ma'am. It's the realest thing they've got, and it's standing on a lie somebody else told." His hands were shaking. "And I'd want to know. God help me. I'd want somebody to knock." Della Reyes couldn't speak. "So you're gonna knock," Colton said, "and I'm gonna be in the truck. You can't." "I can." "Colton, you can't. Do you understand what he did? Do you understand what that man just did today?" She was crying and furious. "He didn't confess. That wasn't a confession. He said inventory in front of a Methodist minister, and then he got in a car and told me there's 18 more, and he did it smiling. I know. He wanted me to know. I know. Why?" And Colton Hayes said, "Because he's already lost." She stopped. "He lost at 8:31 at night in a rainstorm 40 days ago," Colton said, "when a woman with no past put her hands inside a boy and saw a mark on his shoulder. That's it. That's when it ended. Everything since has been a man in a nice jacket driving around Texas buying lunch." He stood up. He put his hand out. "He's not fighting for a secret anymore, ma'am. There's 400 people in this county who heard him say inventory." "Then what's he fighting for?" Colton looked out at the dark. "His sister," he said. At 2:40 in the morning, a light came on in the tack shed. Marisol saw it from the upstairs window and woke Rudy. And Rudy came out in his boots and no shirt and found Colton Hayes sitting on the floor with a saddle blanket thrown back and a box open in front of him. 4 years. He'd had it 4 years. Rudy didn't say a word. He sat down on a tack trunk and he waited. "Rudy." "Yeah. I can't do it." "I know. I've been sitting here 40 minutes. "I know." Colton Hayes said, "What if I look at her and I hate her?" And Rudy Salazar, 64 years old on that land, since 1986, said the only thing he had. "Then you hate her," he said. "And then in the morning you love her again. That's what a marriage is, Colt. Ain't nobody told you that in 4 years, 'cause you took all the pictures down." Colton reached into the box. He took out the first one. He looked at it for a long, long time. And then he said in a voice Rudy Salazar had not heard since 1986, since a 14-year-old boy stood over a hole in the ground and asked if he could sell the place. "Rudy," her voice. "What about it?" "I got it back," Colton Hayes said. "I looked at her and I got it back." He put his head down on his knees and he wept, and Rudy Salazar put a hand on the back of his neck and held on and out. In the hall of the house, Marisol Ybarra sat in a chair outside a boy's door, with a rosary she hadn't used since 1979. And upstairs in the dark, Noah Hayes lay awake with his arms around a 3-legged dog. He had not been asleep. He had not been asleep for 1 minute. And at 3:15 in the morning, he got up very quietly, and he went to the closet, and he got the boot, and he sat down on the floor with the photograph he'd taken back out of the dirt on his way to the truck, because Emilio saw him do it and never said. And he turned on a flashlight. And he looked at a 19-year-old girl in a hospital gown holding a baby for 4 minutes. And Noah Hayes, 11 years old, said out loud to an empty room in a voice so small it barely made it out of him, "You were being funny at me." He held it against his chest. "You were being funny at me on purpose. To have anybody else and you're taking him too. You take everything. You took my mom's grave and my birthday. And now you're taking my dad. Noah. You said you'd never go anywhere, and now I'm the one who has to go." And Della Reyes said the only thing left in her, "Then let me stop it." The kitchen went silent. "How?" Noah said. "By existing." Gus Landry drove 11 hours again and got there at midnight, and he brought a shoebox. "That's it. That's it." Colton said, "Gus, tomorrow at 9, a judge in Lubbock is going to decide whether my son goes to the state, And you drove all night with a shoebox. Mr. Hayes. Gus set it on the table. I've been a claims man 31 years. You know what a claim is. A claim is a story with a receipt stapled to it. Everybody's got the story. Almost nobody's got the receipt. He opened it. Cole says Della Reyes doesn't exist. Fine, he's right. There's no Della Reyes in a computer anywhere in this country, and there hasn't been since 2011, and I know exactly why, because Alan Reyes told me why in a letter before he went to his garage. Gus's hands were shaking. He erased her. On purpose. He thought he was saving her. He took a 19-year-old girl with no people and no money, who'd been through what she'd been through, and he gave her a clean life, and he took the old one out of the file, and 6 years ago I told him it was the stupidest merciful thing I ever saw a man do, and he cried on the phone for 20 minutes. Gus. But here's the thing about a man like Alan Reyes, Gus said. A man like that can't throw anything away either. That's the same sickness Ferris has got. That's the only thing they had in common, and it's the thing that's going to hang the both of them. He took out a spiral notebook. Water-stained. Cheap. What is that? It's a girl's diary, Gus Landry said. 19 years old, 12 years ago, 31 entries, and the last one's dated July 11th, 2011, and it's 4 sentences long, and she wrote it in a clinic bathroom about 9 minutes after they took him. Della couldn't look at it. I gave that to him, she said. I gave that to Alan in Colorado. I gave it to him so he'd understand. He kept it. He kept it. He kept it in a safety deposit box in Amarillo in a bank that closed in 2019, and it took me 4 years and a court order and a woman named Peggy to get it out, and I have had it in my truck for 6 days because I could not figure out how to hand it to you. Della Reyes didn't touch the notebook. Read it, she said. Della. I know what it says. I wrote it. Her voice was flat. Read it out loud so he hears it in a voice that isn't mine. Gus Landry looked at Colton. Colton nodded once. So a 73-year-old claims investigator stood in a ranch kitchen at midnight and read 4 sentences a 19-year-old girl wrote in a clinic bathroom. They said he didn't make it. I held him and he was warm and he had a mark on his shoulder, like somebody spilled something on him and he moved his mouth. I am writing this down because they are going to tell me I am wrong and I am not wrong. His name is Danny, and he was born at 4:40 in the morning, and I am not wrong. Nobody spoke. Colton Hayes said, Danny. Yeah. You named him Danny. For 4 minutes, Della said, and Colton put both hands on the back of a chair and held onto it like a man on a boat. Gus laid it out at 12:40 in the morning, and it took him 9 minutes, and when he was done, nobody in that kitchen could feel their hands. Cole's filing says there's no Della Reyes. That's his whole case, and it's a good one, and I want everybody to understand why it's good. He tapped the notebook. It's good because it's true. She's not in a single system in this country. No school, no tax, no lease, no license under that name. A dead man scrubbed her in 2016, and he did a hell of a job because he was a doctor, and doctors know exactly which forms nobody ever looks at twice. So we prove she existed, Colton said. With what? A diary, Mr. Hayes. I could write that diary tonight. Cole'll say I did. Gus rubbed his eyes. A diary's not a receipt. It's a story. Then what's the receipt? And Gus Landry said her body. Marisol made a small sound. There's a test, Gus said. Costs about $900 and takes about a week, and it will tell a judge in Lubbock that this woman is that boy's mother, and there is not a lawyer alive who can talk his way past it. Not Cole, not God. Then do it. No, Della said. Colton turned on her. What? No. Della. Think about it for 1 second. She hadn't sat down. She hadn't sat down since Wednesday. What does that test prove? That you're his. It proves the certificate's a fraud, she said. That's all it proves. It proves the paper that makes you his father is garbage. And Colton, that's already Cole's position. He filed that. He agreed to it on Monday. Her voice cracked. You want to know why nobody's ordered that test? Because Cole wants it. He'll pay for it himself. That test doesn't save Noah. That test is the thing that takes him. Colton stood there. Say it plain. That test says this boy has no legal parents, Della said. One's a fraud, and the other one's a ghost. And a boy with no legal parents doesn't go home with anybody on Friday. He goes to the state. Rudy Salazar put his face in his hands. That's the trap, Gus said quietly. That's been the trap since Sunday. Every single thing she can prove makes it worse. At 1:15, Colton Hayes said the thing that nearly ended it. He didn't mean to. That was the worst part. He said it the way men say things at 1 in the morning after 5 days, and it came out of a place he didn't know he still had. You knew this would happen. Della turned around. What? You knew? He wasn't yelling. You knew what it does. Gus told you 6 years ago. You've been studying it. You knew that the day you opened your mouth in this county, that boy's whole life comes off the wall like a picture, and you drove 1,100 miles, and you came up my road in the rain anyway. Colton. Gus started. No, I want to hear it. His voice was shaking now. I want to hear the answer. Because I have spent 5 days telling everybody in Texas that you're a good woman, and I believe it, and I'll believe it Friday. But you knew, ma'am. You knew, and you still came. Della Reyes looked at him. Yes, she said. Why? Because he was alive. That's not because he was alive. It came out of her like a shot, and Marisol flinched. Because for 12 years, I had a piece of paper that said, deceased, and a memory of a baby moving his mouth. And every single person on God's earth told me the paper was right and I was crazy. You want to know what that is? That's 12 years of being wrong out loud. That's 12 years of doctors and counselors and my own... She stopped. That's 12 years of people being kind to me about it. The kitchen was silent. And then a man in Odessa called me. Della said, and said he's alive. And you want to know what I did? I sat down on the floor of a gas station in Raton, New Mexico, and I laughed for 11 minutes. Because I was right. Della. And then I got up, she said. And I got in the truck, and I did not think about one single thing after that. Not one. Not you. Not what it costs. Not what it does to a boy. Nothing. I have thought about exactly one thing for 12 years, and it is not a plan, Colton. It's a whole. That's what I'm saying. I know that's what you're saying. Then why does it sound like you're arguing with me? Because you're saying it like a charge, Della said, and I'm saying it like a confession, and those are the same sentence, and they are not the same thing at all. Colton Hayes stood there. Rudy Salazar from the corner said very quietly, She's right, Colt. Rudy. She's right, and you know she's right, and you're doing the thing. Rudy stood up. You're doing the thing you did to Dale. You're getting mad at the person who's in the room. Colton opened his mouth, closed it. And then Colton Hayes did the second bravest thing of his life, which was, sit down. I'm sorry, he said. Nobody moved. He put his hand over his mouth, took it away. I have not said that sentence in 4 years. Ask anybody. Ask Dale Whitaker. I fired a man for having a sick wife, and I paid the hospital anonymous so I wouldn't have to feel it, and I'm sitting in my kitchen at 1 in the morning doing it to you. Della sat down across from him. Colton, they're taking my son on Friday, he said, and you're the only person on this earth who knows how it feels to have a kid taken, and I just spent 4 minutes yelling at you about it. And Della Reyes reached across that table and took his hand. First time. 46 days, and the first time she ever touched him was at 1 in the morning in the worst week of both their lives. Then let's go get him, she said. Noah came downstairs at 1:40 because he'd been at the top of them since midnight. I want to talk to the judge. Everybody turned. Noah. Cody's mom said sometimes they let you. He was in the doorway with the dog. She said sometimes if you're old enough, the judge takes you in the back and asks you what you want. Son, that's not, am I old enough? Gus Landry said. Yes. Colton turned on him. Gus, he's 11. In this state, over 12 is on the record. Under 12 is up to the judge. Gus looked at the boy. Son, I've been in about 400 of those hearings. You want the truth or you want the nice one? Truth. You'll get about 6 minutes, Gus said. In a little room with a judge and a lawyer for the county and a lady from the state who's already made up her mind, and they'll ask you real gentle questions, and everything you say goes in a file that follows you till you're 18. And Noah, the judge, is not going to do what you want. He's going to do what he thinks is safe. Those are different things, and Friday's the day you find out how different. Noah nodded. Okay. Son, I said okay. He came in. He stood at the end of the table. I've got a question, and everybody keeps not answering it, and I'm going to ask it one time, and then I'm going to bed. Nobody breathed. If she'd never come, Noah said. If it was still 8:31 at night in the rain, and she just drove past our gate, would I be dead? Silence. Answer me. Marisol said, Mijo. Would I be dead? And Colton Hayes said yes. Noah stood there. Okay, he said. He turned around and went up the stairs, and Della Reyes put her forehead down on the table, and Colton Hayes sat there with his hand still out where she'd let go of it. At the top of the stairs, Noah stopped. He didn't turn around. She was funny at me, he said to nobody for 40 days, and went to bed. Thursday morning, Hollis Dunn drove to the Hayes place at 10 o'clock and sat in his car for 11 minutes before he got out. Rudy met him in the drive. You're not welcome. I know. You called his note. I know what I did, Rodolfo. Hollis Dunn had a folder in his hand and it was shaking. Go get her. She's not here for you. Go get her, Hollis Dunn said. Or in about 9 hours, I am going to have done something I cannot undo, and I have got a granddaughter, and I would like to be able to look at her. Rudy went and got her. Della came out and stopped 6 feet away and didn't say a word. You know what I did last night, Hollis said. No, I asked her. His mouth was doing something. 9 years old. I sat on the end of her bed and I said, baby, what would you do if you found out you had another grandpa somewhere? And she said, he had to stop. He had to stop for 11 seconds. She said, Papa, that would be 2 birthdays. Nobody spoke. 2 birthdays, Hollis Dunn said. That's what it is. That's what it is to a 9-year-old. It's 2 birthdays. He wiped his face with the back of his wrist angrily like a man who'd been raised not to. And I've been up all night trying to figure out when I turned into a man who'd take a boy off his daddy to keep a 9-year-old from having 2 birthdays. He held out the folder. What is this? That's your note, he said. That's the acceleration. It's rescinded. Board voted at 7 this morning, 4-1. And the one was me, and I voted against rescinding because I'm a coward and I wanted it on the record that I fought it. He laughed. It was terrible. That's who I am, ma'am. That's the whole man. Even when I do right, I do it sideways. Della took the folder. Mr. Dunn. Don't. Mr. Dunn, when did they call you? He stopped. What? Sunday, she said. You were in that diner at 6:30 Monday morning and you live in Abilene. Somebody called you Sunday night. Hollis Dunn stood in that drive. Cole, he said. Prentice Cole called you at home. 10:40 at night. Said he represented an interested party. Said there was a woman making claims and that some families might want to talk about a joint posture. His voice went. A joint posture. That's the words. That's exactly the words I wrote him on an envelope. How many families? He didn't say. Mr. Dunn? He didn't say, ma'am, but I'll tell you what he did. He stopped again. He didn't ask me anything. What? He didn't ask me one question. Hollis Dunn looked up. He didn't ask if I had a child by adoption. He didn't ask the year. He didn't ask her name. He called my house at 10:40 at night and he already knew, and I sat there on my own porch talking to a stranger about my granddaughter. And it did not occur to me till 3 o'clock this morning to wonder how in the hell he got my number. Della Reyes went very still. He's got the list. Ma'am. Cole's got the list. She turned. Rudy. Rudy, go get Gus. Cole's got the ledger. Gus Landry heard it standing in the drive with his coffee, and he set the cup down on the hood of a truck so hard it broke. No, he doesn't. Gus, he doesn't have it. Gus was shaking his head. Della, listen to me. If Prentice Cole had that ledger, it would be gone. It'd have been gone Monday. That man's not sentimental. He'd have burned it in a fireplace in Dallas and slept like a baby. Then how'd he call Hollis Dunn? Somebody told him. Ferris. Ferris? Gus was pacing now. Which means Ferris knows the names. Course he knows the names. He's got a head like a filing cabinet. That's his whole sickness. So he told his lawyer the names. Some of the names. Gus stopped dead. Della, why some... What? Hollis Dunn's a bank director. You want to fight a woman in a courtroom, you don't call a banker in Abilene at 10:40 at night. You call... He put his hand over his mouth. Oh, you son of a bitch. Gus. He didn't give Cole the list, Gus said. He gave Cole the useful ones. Nobody moved. He's been sitting in a cell since Sunday, going through 11 years of files in his head, picking out which of those 18 families had a lever. Gus's voice was rising. A banker. Who else? Who else is in that ledger? Della, a judge, a commissioner, a man at the state. And Hollis Dunn said from beside his car in a voice like a man stepping off a ledge, There's a woman. They both turned. At the state, Hollis said. In the department. I met her once. 9 years ago at a thing in Austin. It was a fundraiser. It was one of Wade's things, and she was standing there with a little boy, and Wade introduced her, and he had his hand on the back of her neck. He swallowed. Like a fence post. Gus Landry said, What's her name? I don't remember. Mr. Dunn. I don't remember, Hollis said, but I'll tell you what she does. She's the one that signs off on emergency removals in 9 counties. The whole drive went silent. Friday, Colton said from the porch, and nobody had heard him come out. 9 a.m. Colt. She's the one taking my son. They found her name in 40 minutes because Peggy at the Lubbock Law Library had never once in her life said no to Rudy Salazar. Charlene Voss, regional supervisor, 26 years in the department, and an adopted son, age 11, born July 2011. Gus Landry sat down on the floor of the tack room. Same month, he said. Della. Same month. Gus. Number 12. His hands were over his face. You were 11. There's a 12. There's a 12 and she works for the state, and she's been signing removals for 9 counties for 11 years, and she's going to be in that room tomorrow at 9. Then we tell the judge. With what? Gus looked up, and his eyes were red. With a diary and a suicide note and a banker's memory of a party Della. We walk in there tomorrow and accuse a 26-year veteran of the Department of buying a child, and we lose that boy in 11 minutes. We hand him to them. That's not a case. That's a symptom. That's what a crazy woman with a fake license sounds like, and Cole will let me talk for 20 minutes because every word I say helps him. Then what do we need? And Gus Landry said, the ledger. Nobody's found it in 6 years. Nobody's looked in the right place in 6 years, Gus said, because for 6 years I've been looking for a man's hiding place, and I've had it backwards the whole time. What? Wade Ferris doesn't hide things, Gus said slowly. He keeps things. That's not the same. A man who hides something puts it where nobody goes. He stood up. A man who keeps something puts it where he can visit it. Nobody breathed, and Marisol Wibara, who had been standing in the doorway with a dish towel for 11 minutes and had said nothing at all, said, he goes to the grave. Everything stopped. Every July, Marisol said. 11 years. Every July 11th, he drives to Silver Creek and he goes to that stone and he stands there 45 minutes, and then he gets in his car and he drives back to Austin and he doesn't call this house, and he never has. Marisol. He didn't even come for her funeral. Her voice was breaking. Sarah's own brother. He came late. He stood in the back and left before the dirt. But every July he drives 4 hours to stand at a baby's grave with nothing in it. Rudy Salazar said, "Oh my God." He put it in there, Gus whispered. He put it in the box. He carried a box out of this kitchen in July of 2011, and Marisol asked him what was in it, and he said, "Linens," Marisol said. Colton Hayes was already moving. "Barter saw." Curtis Pope said no. He said it at 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, standing in his own office with his hat off and his hands out. "Colt, I can't." "Curtis, I can't, and I want you to understand it's not because I don't believe you." Curtis Pope's voice was coming apart. "It's because I do. Colt, listen to me. If I go to a judge tonight for an order to open that grave, you know what I'm putting in the affidavit. A housekeeper remembers a box. A dead man wrote a letter. A banker recalls a party, and Cole gets that affidavit at 9 tomorrow morning, and he waves it at Judge Renfro and says, 'Your Honor, this is the county that dug up a baby's grave on a hunch, and that boy is gone by 9:40. Curtis. And that's if I get the order." He was almost pleading. "Which I won't. Not by tomorrow. Not in this state." Colton Hayes stood there. "Then I'll dig it myself." "Colt." "I'll go out there tonight with a shovel." "And I will arrest you," Curtis said, "at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning in front of Judge Renfro, and that is exactly what Prentice Cole wants. And you know it, and I know it, and I have never in my life wanted so bad to look the other way, and I cannot." Nobody spoke, and then Della Reyes said from the doorway, "You don't need an order." Everybody turned. "Ma'am." "There's no body," she said. Curtis blinked. "What?" Wade Ferris said it. Sunday, in front of 400 people and a sheriff. Her voice was rising. "You asked him whose baby was in that ground, and he said nobody's. He said there's no crime, there's no body, there's no baby. He said, 'Go get a shovel, Curtis.' He said it to your face." Curtis Pope's mouth opened. "That's not a grave," Della said. "That's a box in the dirt. It's not consecrated. It's not a burial. There's no death certificate, because there's no death. Sheriff, there is not one piece of paper in this county that says anything is in that ground. That's a hole with a rock on it on land that belongs to—" She stopped. Everyone looked at Colton. "The Hayes family," Marisol said quietly. "The south corner. Since 1931. His grandmother's in it. His mother. His father." She swallowed. "Sarah." Colton Hayes said, "It's my dirt." Curtis Pope sat down very slowly in his own chair. "Say that again." "It's my dirt, Curtis." Colton's hands were shaking. "It's not a county cemetery. It's not a church. It's a family plot on deeded land I pay taxes on, and the man who put that stone up said in front of the Methodist minister that there's nothing under it, and I'm the owner, and I'm telling you right now that I want to move a rock in my own field." "Colt, am I breaking a law?" Curtis Pope stared at him. "Am I breaking a law, Curtis?" And Curtis Pope, 40 years old, two-time voter for Wade Ferris, put his hat on and said the sentence that ended a 22-year career in Texas politics. "Not if I'm standing there," he said. They went at 6 o'clock in the evening with 4 men and 2 shovels and a sheriff, and every single one of them was terrified. Rudy hit it at 9 inches. He stopped. He looked up. "It's shallow." "How shallow?" 9 inches, Colt. 9 inches. Rudy's voice was strange. "You don't put a baby at 9 inches. You don't put a dog at 9 inches. Nobody said anything, because there it was, right there, before anybody touched a thing. A man who buries a child digs. A man who is hiding a box does not. They got it up at 6:20. It was a cedar chest about the size of a footlocker, and it weighed 40 pounds, and Emilio Vargas and Rudy Salazar carried it out of that hole and set it in the grass and stepped back like it might go off. Nobody moved. Curtis Pope said, "Mr. Hayes, you want to open your property?" Colton didn't move. "Colt." "I can't." "Colt, 11 years I've walked past that stone." His voice was gone. 11 years. I brought him out here when he was 5. He put a rock on it. He picked out a rock from the creek because he said his brother ought to have a toy, and I stood there, and I let him do it, and I have never once been able to look at that stone since, and I can't open it. Della Reyes knelt down. "Then I will." "Ma'am, I've been opening this box for 12 years, she said. "One more time won't kill me." She opened it, and every man standing in that field made a sound. There was no baby. There were ledgers. 3 of them. Green, cheap, the kind you buy at a feed store. And under the ledgers, in 11 manila folders held together with rubber bands that had gone to dust, were photographs, hundreds of them, and under those in a shoebox were letters. Della picked up the top one. It was addressed to Sarah. It was in a woman's handwriting. "Thank you for the pictures." She read, and her voice broke on it. "He looks happy. Please don't look for me." Marisol Ybarra sat down in the grass. "He kept them," Gus whispered. "He kept the letters he forged. He wrote them and mailed them to his own sister, and when she died he took them back, and he put them in a box in a grave. Because he couldn't throw them away," Della said. She was staring at the first ledger. "Della," she opened it, and there was a column of names, and beside each name, a date, and beside each date, a number, and on the 11th line down in blue ink, 12 years old, in a handwriting she'd know till the day she died 11. Reyes D. July 11th. Deceased. Live hold. Amarillo $0. 0. She looked at it a long time. "Gus." "Yeah?" "There's no number on mine." Gus Landry looked over her shoulder. And Gus Landry, 31 years a claims man, 6 years on this, 73 years old, said, "Oh, Della." "What?" "There's a number on all of them." "I see that, Gus. What does it?" "Look at 9, he said. "Look at 10. Look at 12. She looked. 9. $40,000. 10. $40,000. 12. $40,000. 11. $0. "He didn't sell you," Gus said. The field went silent. "He didn't sell your boy Della. He took him. Nobody paid. There's no family on that line because there was never going to be a family on that line." Gus's hands were over his mouth. He filed 4 days early because he wasn't filling an order. He was Della, he was shopping. For what? And Gus Landry said, for his sister. Della Reyes stood up in a field with a ledger in her hands. No. Della. No. Sarah's baby died in July. She hadn't. The stillbirth was on the 9th, Gus. I've got she lost him on the 9th, and I delivered on the 11th. That's 2 days he couldn't have. She stopped. Everything in her stopped. 4 days early, she said. Nobody breathed. He filed on the 7th. Gus Landry closed his eyes. He knew, Della said. Sarah was 36 weeks, and something was wrong, and he was a doctor, and he knew 4 days out that she was going to lose that baby, and he went and found a 19-year-old girl with the right due date, and nobody in the world to ask about her, and She couldn't finish. He put her on hold, Gus said. Colton Hayes turned around and walked 11 steps into the dark, and no one followed him. They heard him be sick in the grass. At 7:40 that night, 4 men and a sheriff and a woman with no legal name sat in a kitchen with 3 ledgers on the table and read 18 lines. Number 12 was Voss, not the mother, the receiving line. Voss, C, $0. Gus said, "That's not a purchase." "Then what is it?" "That's a payment." He looked up. "That's what she got paid with. Della, she didn't buy a baby. She got given one." Curtis Pope said, "For what?" And Gus Landry said, for 26 years of signing things.
Batata.
They put it together in an hour and 11 minutes, and when they were done, Curtis Pope had to go outside. 18 children, 9 years, 5 counties, and 7 of the 18 had a 0 in the money column. A 0 and a name, a county judge in Hale County, a man at the state licensing board, a woman named Charlene Voss who signed emergency removals for 9 counties, a district clerk, a sheriff in a county Curtis had eaten dinner in, 7 people who had not paid $1. He didn't run a business, Gus said. His voice was hollow. That's what I had wrong for 6 years. I kept looking for money and there's no money. Della, $40,000 a pop. Times 11 is nothing. That's not a fortune. That man had more than that in a car. Then what was it? And Gus Landry said, it was a rope. Nobody spoke. He gave 7 people the one thing they wanted most on this earth, Gus said, and every single day since those 7 people have woken up in a house with a child in it that they cannot explain. That's not a bribe. A bribe you can pay back. He was shaking. You can't give a kid back. You can't ever give a kid back. He put a rope around 7 necks, and he never had to pull it once, because every one of them pulls it themselves every morning when they walk past that kid's door. Colton Hayes said, that's what he did to my wife. Everyone turned. That's exactly what he did to my wife, Colton said. He gave her a baby, and then for 11 years she couldn't ask one question about him, because if she asked, she'd have to know. He put his hands flat on the table. She wrote letters, Marisol. She wrote letters to a woman who didn't exist, and she kept the answers in a box. And my wife was the smartest person I ever met in my life, and she never asked one question, and I always thought that was grief. He looked up. That was the rope.
Don.
Prentice Cole called the ranch at 9:15 that night. Colton put him on speaker in a kitchen with 8 people in it and a sheriff. Mr. Hayes? Mr. Cole, I'll be brief. I'm authorized to offer a stipulation. Cole's voice was pleasant, and it was tired, and it was the voice of a man billing $900 an hour at 9 at night. Tomorrow morning, my client will not oppose your custody. In fact, we'll join it. We'll ask Judge Renfro to place the child with you as a matter of continuity, and we'll ask the county to withdraw, and Mr. Hayes they will, because the county's only in this because they don't have a warm body to hand him to. Nobody moved. And, Colton said, and Ms. Reyes withdraws her claim. The kitchen went absolutely still. That's it, Cole said. That's the whole thing. She signs a release, she goes home, you keep your son, everybody sleeps. 11 years of a boy's life doesn't come apart on a Friday morning. And the other 17? There are no other 17, Mr. Hayes. There's a woman with a diary. Colton looked at Della. Della looked at the table. Ms. Reyes, Cole said. Are you there? I'm here. Then I'll say it to you plain, and then I'll hang up because it's late and I've got a hearing. A pause. You get him. That's what I'm offering. You get your son, he stays in that house, he grows up on that ranch, he keeps his father, he keeps his dog, and you can be whatever you want to be. Aunt, friend, the vet. You can stand in that kitchen for the rest of your life. Della didn't move. Or, Cole said, you can walk into a courtroom at 9 tomorrow with a suicide note and take a swing at me, and I will spend 4 hours proving you do not exist, and that boy will spend tomorrow night in a facility in Lubbock. Those are the 2 doors, ma'am. There's not a third one. Silence. Mr. Cole, Della said. Ma'am. How'd you get Hollis Dunn's home number? The line was quiet. It was quiet for 4 seconds, and every single person in that kitchen heard those 4 seconds and knew exactly what they were. Good night, Ms. Reyes, Prentice Cole said. Click. Gus Landry stood up so fast his chair went over. He doesn't know. Gus, he doesn't know we've got it. Gus was laughing and crying at the same time. Della, he called here at 9:15 at night to beg. That's not a lawyer with a case. That's a lawyer with a client. Ferris told him to make that call. Ferris made that call. That's Wade Ferris, sitting in a house in Austin with an ankle monitor at 9 at night, realizing that tomorrow morning somebody's going to say the name Charlene Voss out loud in a courtroom. Gus. And he cannot stop it, and the only card he's got left is you. And so he offered you the one thing he knew you couldn't turn, Gus. Gus stopped. Della Reyes was looking at the table. He offered me my son, she said. Nobody spoke. He offered me my son, and all I have to do is leave 17 kids in the dark forever. Her voice was flat as water. And Gus, I want it. Della, I want it. She looked up and her face was terrible. I want to take it. I've been sitting here 11 minutes doing the math, and there's a version where I say yes, and I sleep in that room down the hall for 20 years, and I watch him graduate, and I get everything, and the price is 17 women I've never met. Nobody moved. That's the same trade, she said. What? That's the exact same trade Sarah made. The kitchen was silent. She got a baby, and she never asked one question, Della said. For 11 years, and every single one of you has spent 5 days telling me she was a good woman who got lied to, and she was, and she still didn't ask. She stood up. And now it's my turn, and the offer's on the table, and I've been considering it. Colton Hayes stood up too. Della, that's what he does. Her hands were over her face. That's what he does, Colton. Don't you see it? He doesn't buy people. He finds the one thing you'd die for, and he hands it to you, and he lets you decide to be quiet. He never has to say a word. She was shaking. Charlene Voss didn't take a bribe. Hollis Dunn didn't take a bribe. Your wife didn't take a bribe. He just gave everybody a kid, and then stood back and watched us all shut our own mouths. Nobody could speak. That's the whole thing, Della Reyes said. That's the whole crime. He never made anybody do anything. And Marisol Ibarra said from the sink in a voice like 40 years, then somebody's got to be the first one to say it out loud. Umi. Noah Hayes was on the stairs. He'd been on the stairs the whole time. He came down and stood in the doorway, and every adult in that kitchen went white, and he said one thing, take the deal. Noah, take the deal. His voice cracked in the middle. You get me. That's what he said. You get me, and I stay here, and I keep Dad, and I keep Tripod, and nobody has to... Noah, you get me? He was screaming. That's what you came for. That's what you drove 1,100 miles for. You win. Why isn't that enough? Why is nothing ever enough for anybody in this house? Della Reyes crossed that kitchen and went down on her knees in front of her son. Because there's a boy in Midland, she said. Noah stopped. He's 14, Della said. He's got a scholarship. There's a girl in Abilene, and she's 9, and she thinks 2 grandpas means 2 birthdays. And there's a kid somewhere in this state who's 11 years old. Honey, 11 same as you. And his mama is sitting in a pasture at 3 o'clock in the morning right now with a piece of paper that says deceased, and everybody she knows has been kind to her about it for 12 years. Noah's face broke. That's not fair. No, that's not fair. You can't put that on me. I'm not putting it on you, Della said. I'm telling you why. You asked why, and you're 11 and you deserve the real one, so here it is. If I take that deal, I get you. And every time I look at you for the next 20 years, I'll see 17 kids I left in the dark to do it. Her voice went. And Noah, you'd know. You wouldn't know how you know. But you'd know. Because that's what happened to your mother, and you spent 11 years in a house with a woman who couldn't ask one question, and you never once knew why she was sad. Noah Hayes stood there in his pajamas, and then he said very quietly, Was she? Everybody turned. Was she sad? And Colton Hayes said, Yeah, son, she was sad, every July. Noah nodded, 11 years old. He nodded, and he wiped his face with his sleeve, hard the way Marisol had watched him do 100 times, and he said, Then don't take it. They were in Lubbock at 8:15 the next morning. Prentice Cole saw the box. That was all. That was the whole hearing, honestly. Prentice Cole standing in a hallway at 8:15 in the morning, watching Rudy Salazar and Emilio Vargas carry a 40-pound cedar chest full of dirt through a courthouse door with a sheriff walking behind it. He looked at it for 4 seconds. Then he went and sat down and did not say one word to anybody. At 8:31, Charlene Voss came around the corner with a folder and stopped dead. She looked at the box. She looked at Della Reyes. And she said out loud in a hallway in front of a bailiff and 3 attorneys and a boy of 11, "Is he in there?" Nobody breathed. "Ma'am?" the bailiff said. Charlene Voss put her hand on the wall. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry, I thought—" And then Charlene Voss, 26 years in the department, supervisor of emergency removals for 9 Texas counties, sat down on a bench in a courthouse hallway and said the sentence that ended it. "I've been waiting 11 years for somebody to knock." Judge Renfro took 90 minutes. He took 90 minutes, and he came back in, and he did not look at Cole, and he did not look at the county, and he said this: "I've got a box of ledgers in my chambers that I am going to spend the rest of my career on, and I'm going to ask the U.S. Attorney to spend the rest of his on it. And I want the record to reflect that this court is not equipped for what's in that box." He took his glasses off. "But that's not today. Today is one boy." Nobody breathed. "I'm not going to pretend I know how to do this," Judge Renfro said. "The certificate is void. The petitioner does not legally exist, and I am told that's the fault of a dead man. Mr. Hayes has no order and no adoption and 11 years. He put his glasses back on. "So I asked the child." Colton Hayes stopped breathing. "He was in my chambers for 6 minutes, and I've been at this 19 years, and I'm going to read you what he said, because I wrote it down, and I don't write things down." He picked up a card. "I asked him where he wanted to live," Judge Renfro said. "And he said, 'Sir, I don't have a home right now. I have 2 people.'" The courtroom was silent. "And I said, 'Son, that's not what I asked.' And he said—" The judge stopped. He had to stop. He said, "Then, can I have the 2 people?" Wade Ferris pled in November. He didn't fight. That surprised everybody but Della. He walked into a federal courthouse in Amarillo with an ankle monitor and a public defender because Prentice Cole had withdrawn in August, and he pled to 19 counts, and he got 40 years, and he was 53. He asked for one thing. He asked to say something, and the judge, against everybody's advice, let him. Wade Ferris stood up and turned around and found Della Reyes in the 3rd row, and he did not apologize. 19, he said. "You know what nobody's asked me? Not the FBI, not one reporter, not one." His voice was perfectly steady. "Nobody's asked me why I stopped." Nobody moved. "I stopped in 2016, he said. 5 years before anybody caught me. 5 years, and I never did another one, and nobody has asked me why." "Mr. Ferris?" "Because Sarah got sick," Wade Ferris said. The courtroom went silent. "And I sat in a room and I watched her die," he said. "And I thought, there it is. There it is. That's the bill." He was crying now, and his voice never moved an inch. "I did 19 of them to keep one woman alive, and it didn't work, and I want you all to understand it never would have worked. That's the thing. There was no number. I'd have done 100. He looked at Della. "You want an apology?" "No," Della said. The whole room turned. No. No." Della Reyes said, "I want the other 7 names." Wade Ferris looked at her for a long, long moment, and then he laughed one short, and it was the most human sound he'd made in 12 years. "Third ledger," he said. "Back cover, inside the board." And he sat down. It took 4 years. That's the part nobody puts in a story. It took 4 years, and it was not clean, and it did not look like justice on any single day of it. 11 of the 18 chose to know. 7 didn't. Della Reyes knocked on 18 doors, and Colton Hayes sat in the truck for every one of them. And on the 9th one, a man in Sweetwater put a rifle on her, and she stood there and did not move. and afterward she sat in the passenger seat for 11 minutes and then said drive, and they drove to the 10th. 4 mothers got their children back. 6 got a phone call once a year and a photograph. 1 got a letter that said, "Please don't look for me," and this time it was real. And Della Reyes framed it, and Gus Landry never understood that and never asked. 2 of them told her to go to hell. She went anyway. She sat outside the house in Odessa on the driveway for 6 hours, and then she got up and left and mailed the file, and the woman called her 11 months later at 2 in the morning and cried for 40 minutes and then hung up, and Della never heard from her again. Charlene Voss did 18 months and testified for 9 days. Hollis Dunn resigned from the board on a Tuesday and drove to a house in Lubbock and knocked on a door himself, and the woman who opened it screamed at him for 11 minutes on her own porch, and he stood there and took every word. Then she let him in. His granddaughter has 2 birthdays. Noah Hayes turned 15 on a Thursday. He came in the kitchen and Marisol had the cake and Rudy was there and Emilio was there and Dale Whitaker was there because Dale Whitaker had come back to work in the spring of the first year, and neither he nor Colton had ever said one word about it. And Noah said, "Where's Mom?" Nobody flinched anymore. It had taken about 2 years for nobody to flinch. "Which one?" Colton said. "Both," Noah said. So they went out to the south corner, all of them, and they stood at a stone with a woman's name on it, and a smaller stone with nothing under it. And Noah Hayes, at 15 years old, put a rock on the small one. He did that every year. He never explained it. Della never asked. They got married in the 4th year. Not a big thing. Curtis Pope came. Gus Landry gave her away and cried through the whole thing, and Marisol played nothing on nothing and made 400 tamales. She asked him the night before on the ramp, "You're sure?" "Ma'am." "Colton, I'm serious. Ask me anything. Anything you want. Right now tonight before it's on paper." Her hands were shaking. "Because I offered you the whole thing once in your driveway at midnight, and you said no, and I've thought about that every day for 4 years. Colton Hayes said, "I don't have a question." "Everybody has a question. I had one," he said. "I had it for 4 years, and I got the answer at a rodeo, and it about killed me, and then it made my whole life." He took her hand. "You want to hear it?" "Yes." "I wanted to know." Colton said, "If there was one person on this earth who'd tell me the truth even if it cost them everything they came for." She couldn't speak. "You told a judge no," he said. "You told a lawyer no with my son standing in the room. You had him. Ma'am, you had him. They put him in your hand, and you gave him back so 17 strangers could get a phone call." His voice went. "I've been married before. I loved her. I'd take her back tomorrow if God offered. But I lived 11 years next to a woman who was never allowed to ask a question, and I didn't know it, and it ate her alive." Colton. "So no Della," Colton Hayes said. "I don't have a question. I married the answer." There's a photograph on the wall now. There's about 40 of them. That was Noah. That was Noah at 16, home from a job, who went out to the tack shed on a Saturday with a hammer and a box of nails and put every single one of them up in the hall without asking anybody. And Colton Hayes came in from the barn and stopped in that hallway and stood there for 11 minutes. Sarah's in 9 of them. And there's one at the end, crooked in a cheap frame, that a boy took out of the dirt at a rodeo and kept in a boot in his closet for 4 days. A 19-year-old girl in a hospital gown, holding something for 4 minutes. Somebody wrote on the mat under it in pencil, in an 11-year-old's handwriting that nobody ever painted over. She was right. She was. That's the whole story. A girl held a baby for 4 minutes, and a man in a nice jacket told the world she was wrong, and she believed herself for 12 years, while everybody who loved her was kind to her about it, and she was right, and she drove 1,100 miles, and she was right, and she stood in the dirt in front of 400 people, and lost everything she came for, and she was right. Wade Ferris built a family out of a lie, and it held for 11 years. Della Reyes told the truth, and it broke everything in 9 days. And on the other side of it, there is a ranch in Silver Creek with a ramp on the porch, and a dog that's been dead 6 years and buried at the south corner next to a stone with nothing under it, and a hallway full of faces, and a man who says his wife's name out loud every single day, so he never loses her voice again. Love did not survive the truth in this story. Love was built out of it. A board at a time by hand, by a man with a 2x4 who couldn't say why, and a woman who knocked on 18 doors, knowing what it would cost, and a boy who stood in a courthouse and asked if he could have the 2 people. That family was not given to them. They dug it out of the ground themselves.